$4 billion. The cost of corporate crimes was in the hundreds of billions, as it is every year. These include security scams that ran around $15 billion that year, car repair fraud that hit around $40 billion that year, insurance swindles and corporate fraud found on your health insurance, HMO, and hospital billings that runs between $100 and $400 billion a year, 100 times greater than all the burglaries in the country combined. Then there are the occasional really big crimes like Neil Bush's savings and loans scandal that then Attorney General Dick Thornburgh called the biggest white-collar swindle in history, or the actions of banksters and defense contractors that get no investigations whatsoever from either the Bush or the Obama administrations. More people die as a result of corporate activity than because of the actions of deranged killers or overwrought spouses. According to the Corporate Crime Reporter, the FBI reported that 1998 saw about 19,000 Americans murdered at the hands of other people. But that same year, 56,000 people died from work-related diseases like black lung and asbestosis that went unreported by the FBI. And many times that number died from the silent violence of pollution, contaminated food, hazardous consumer products, and hospital malpractice. Much of the human death caused by corporate activity has arguable benefits. For example, the many cancers caused by compounds associated with plastics or pesticides. But the cost of these deaths isn't factored into the unit cost of the products. So there's no financial incentive for industry to develop toxin-free or toxin-reduced alternatives, or to use the more expensive but less toxic alternatives that already exist. This is a process known as internalizing profits and externalizing costs. The corporation profits from the toxins, and the public pays for the cancers, both in healthcare costs and lost productivity from sick and dying workers. It's been a standard operating procedure for centuries and was pushed back against for only a few decades in the 1960s and 70s, with the consumer movement that came out of the publication of Rachel Carlson's book Silent Spring and Ralph Nader's book Unsafe at Any Speed. Since the Reagan administration, however, dumping externalities on the public has become a common and accepted practice across the business spectrum. One of the easiest ways to do it is to simply move the toxin producing or toxin using factory or process to a country with lax environmental and labor laws like China or Vietnam, so that not only are labor costs lowered, but more importantly, the cost of dealing with externalities like workman's compensation from injury and exposure and toxic emissions and death in the workplace, so that all those costs drop to zero or close to it. And then there are the big mistakes. In 1998, one of America's largest meatpacking companies replaced a refrigerating unit on one of its processing lines. Shortly thereafter, the detectors it had in place on the line to look for the deadly cold-loving bacteria like Listeria monocytogenes started to react, indicating high levels of bacterial contamination. The company's response was immediate. Carolyn Smith DeWall of the Center for Science and the Public Interest told reporters Russell Mochaber and Robert Weissman, quote, "Then their studies started coming up positive, so they stopped testing. This company's Fourth Amendment right to privacy blocked surprise inspections by the government." They're a person, right? The detectors were apparently turned off for a full month before the Centers for Disease Control frantically trying to find the source of the bacteria that was killing people, mostly children, all over the United States. Used DNA fingerprinting to track the bacteria that was causing the nationwide outbreak of Listeria back to the plant, provoking a nationwide recall of millions of pounds of the product. But during that month, hundreds of people consuming this company's products were sickened by Listeria, and 21 humans died from it. The U.S. Attorney's Office, according to Mochaber and Weissman, said, quote, "There was insufficient evidence to bring a felony charge against the company. Instead, the company paid a $200,000 fine and issued an unprecedented joint press release with the Bush administration's USDA that managed to say that the company had paid the fine without ever mentioning the brand name of the product that had contaminated and caused the deaths." This is truly amazing. I mean, corporate crime costs us more and kills more people, and we don't even talk about it. It's amazing. Anyhow, the book is Unequal Protection: How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. It is Thursday, April 6th. A lot of news happening, but I think the main piece to kick the show off with is that about 1 hour ago, there was a vote in the Senate, what's called a cloture vote. This is where the filibuster would either hold or fail, and the cloture vote failed, which means the filibuster held 55 to 45. So the Democrats in the Senate were able to maintain the filibuster. What that means is there is no vote on Neil Gorsuch to get a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court because of all of the reasons why he should not get that. And, we've talked this week about at least four. One, it's a stolen seat. It's a stolen seat. McConnell abrogated his constitutional duty and to advise and consent. They did nothing, and they stole this seat. Two, Gorsuch is an ideological extremist. He's to the right of Scalia. Three, he was, at the best case, he was obfuscating at his confirmation hearing. I thought it was more like straightforward lying. He was asked about his opinions on things, and he basically said, I don't have one, even though you have a body of work that shows that. And four, the $17 million spent by a shadowy cabal of corporate Wall Street, we don't know, but big money power to install this guy into this seat, and he would be ruling on business that these businesses would have in front of the Supreme Court. So for at least those four reasons, and there are many more, the Democrats filibustered Neil Gorsuch, which is the same standard that Obama's Supreme Court picks were held to. So there's nothing going on there that is not routine and normal. The next steps, what McConnell does next, is what we want to watch. And I'm really happy to be joined on Skype by Heidi Hess from Credo Action, who's been leading a fight on this issue and has been raising the voices of, I don't remember. Heidi, thanks for joining us.
Hi.
How many petition signatures did you deliver?
We had over 200,000.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of people's voices demanding that Democrats stay strong in holding Gorsuch to just the same standard that Obama's previous picks were held to. Heidi, what do you think of what's going on right now in D.C.? The filibuster has held, and we will see the next pieces of the fight coming around in the next couple hours.
Yeah, I think we are really, really happy that so many Democrats held the line and joined Senator Merkley's filibuster of Gorsuch, and are very disappointed at Senators Manchin and Heitkamp and Donnelly and Bennett for voting to advance the nomination and really turning their backs on democratic values and the people who are most threatened by Trump's agenda. We were not surprised that Republicans are on this path. Gorsuch is a dream Supreme Court justice for them. So it's not surprising that this is where we are on the Republican side, but we're really pleased that Democrats really held together and held the line.
So let's talk a little bit about the dream candidacy, and then I want to lay out the next, basically 6 or 7 steps of this showdown. He is the dream candidate of one part of the Republican Party, the corporate part of the Republican Party. This is a guy who's voted in favor of corporate money power 100% of the time. And, that is specifically why McConnell and his caucus stole the seat, right? This was their commandment. Put somebody in who will work for big money power. Hopefully they'll be young, and Gorsuch is young, so that they will work for big money power, Wall Street, big insurance, big pharma, for decades, and always ruling in favor of big money.
Yeah, and I think not only that, but also, you know, consistently ruling against the Voting Rights Act, consistently ruling against women, you know, likely to rule against LGBTQ community, lots of other things, right, that are on the sort of more the social end of Republicans' extreme agenda. That I think they were also hoping that they could get a Supreme Court nominee who would help them sort of undermine the civil rights gains of the last decades and really and really also do that work on the court.
So he's the perfect storm of tying together both sides of the horrible equation and advancing money and corporate power while diminishing civil rights for the people and diminishing the rights of people, making people have less power through an activist Supreme Court agenda. So what is next for you all in this fight? Where do you see the next kind of points where we can maybe have some impact?
You're talking about the court fight or sort of where we go after?
Let's stick with the court fight. Do you want me to lay out a couple of the things coming up? I mean, most of them are...
No, I mean, yeah, and so we're pouring calls into into key Republican offices today, right? I think that, you know, Republicans have a really important choice to make right now, right? You know, they are about to hand the Supreme Court not only to Donald Trump, who is a racist and a misogynist and a fascist, but also who's under investigation by the FBI, right? And so, and they showed us very clearly last year that, you know, they were fine to have an 8-person Supreme Court while they waited to hopefully win the presidency. So there's no rush to confirm Gorsuch. There's really no reason why
they should change the rules.
There's no reason to put him on when, you know, some Republican senators, let's remember, were, you know, saying that they would leave the seat open for Hillary Clinton's entire term. Right. So there's some Republicans, I think, who really need to be faced with that decision. And so our members are calling them right now. And they are, you know, demanding that they make a choice that's about our democracy and about the integrity of the Constitution, and not just a choice that's for, you know, partisan gain.
So, Heidi, can you stick with us for the next segment?
Yeah, definitely.
So we want to keep this conversation going. And I'll lay out a couple things that right now, process-wise, there's a bunch of process, then 30 hours of debate. And really when we're going to see whether McConnell changes the rules is tomorrow. So this is our timeline. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we'll be right back after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We want to hear from you on the Thom Hartmann Program, so give us a call. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. Still with us on Skype is Heidi Hess, talking about Neil Gorsuch and the fight that is unfolding in the Senate. And we want to hear from you about this. So give us a call. But Heidi, can I lay out a little bit of the boring process as it comes? And we're going to have one more segment, and hopefully we can take some calls about, you know, what people can do. I want you to definitely tell them where they can find out how to join you and your activism. But
Great.
So the cloture vote failed, 55-45. Now the motion to reconsider, I believe, is happening right now. There will be a big moment when McConnell actually has to go in there and he has to make a point of order, and that is the beginning of the process of changing the rules. So he is going to make a point of order, and then there could be more procedural votes after that. So we're not sure if the Democrats are actually going to throw more procedural votes that could slow it down more, and that could happen. Then there'll be a vote on appealing the ruling of the chair. Following that vote, this is the Senate. It's if you are wondering, it's this complicated on purpose to make it very difficult to follow. There'll be a second cloture vote. So there's a second time where the filibuster has to hold. After that, 30 hours of debate. So that is what's going to push this into tomorrow. And then the final vote is going to be tomorrow. So the vote on appealing the ruling of the chair is when they would change the rules. And then another filibuster, but they would say, only 51 votes are necessary. And that is when now you've changed the rules of the Senate, and that is generally forever going forward. And because it's rare that it would go backwards from there. And then we would have a vote on him, on Gorsuch, tomorrow. So I feel like there's two key points here. But maybe there is only one. Maybe there's only the pointing at the changing of the rules. Because if they're going to change the rules, they're going to confirm him. Is that kind of your read on it?
That's our read for sure.
So when do you think, probably just hammer offices right now? And there are Republicans who like the process. They don't, like changing the process to give the Supreme Court pick to a man under a cloud, an FBI investigation, as you said, all of that, is John McCain jumping to do this? There are senators who there really is a question of whether they want to do this or not. Yep,
I think that's right.
So we're gonna go out to a break and come back in and take some calls. But who are your main targets on the Republican side? I mean, I would think Jeff Flake, John McCain, then somewhat the moderate Susan Collins, maybe Heller because he's up for re-election.
Yep,
Lisa
you got them all so
Murkowski.
far. Yep, that's it. Those five.
Those are the five.
Yep.
Heidi, we're going to come right back taking calls on the Supreme Court fight, which is dominating the news, even though there's an enormous amount of news happening this week. So we want to hear from you. Give us a call. Let's talk about Supreme Court, Neil Gorsuch. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and I'm still joined by Skype with Heidi from Credo. Heidi, thanks for staying with us.
Hey,
so
Alex.
We are going to be targeting this activism basically at the vote to overturn the rule that is, known as the filibuster, which says that you need 60 votes. Who are the 5 or so Senate Republicans who you think need to be targeted the most?
Yeah, so we're targeting Susan Collins from Maine and Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. We're targeting Dean Heller in Nevada, and we're targeting both senators in Arizona, John McCain and Jeff Flake.
What about like Capito, Portman, is there any indication that they are on the fence on this at all?
Not that we've seen. We're really trying to make sure that that our members are really focused on the people that we think are most likely to, vote with their conscience, vote with their sense of Senate, their commitment to Senate tradition, which obviously they weren't committed to very highly for the last year with Merrick Garland. But, like you said, some of them don't want to totally explode this tradition. So we're trying to really pour calls in.
And let's be honest about let's really dig in, because Tom's listeners and viewers are really savvy on all this stuff. Jeff Flake and John McCain would probably do it just because they hate Trump. I mean, they like viscerally hate the man, and so they might, right, like targeting them because they would be probably motivated by not liking Donald Trump. John McCain, it must, make him super salty every morning, being like, that's the Republican who's the president? That should be me. Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins are generally the moderates that, you could see them voting the right way on this because they genuinely believe it. And they are representing their constituents in Maine and Alaska. And Dean Heller, I believe, is probably just pure gross politics, but whatever, as long as, because he's facing a very difficult reelection next year. So what else can, so we have those senators, and we do, I always say that really, if you're in those states, just call every one of their offices, one after another, just keep calling. You call their district office, their DC office. What other forms of activism can people take right now?
I think right now calling is probably the most important thing. And, if you know people in those states, get them to call, even if you're not there, and call from out of state, right? These folks are making a decision that doesn't just impact their constituent, it impacts everybody in the country. And I think they need to know that, and they need to hear that. So I would say, between now and tomorrow, that calls are the most important thing.
Okay, so give the Congressional Switchboard a call, 202-225-3121. But also go online, Google these 5 senators. They all have multiple offices. We actually at Social Security Works, we have visited Maine, Nevada, and Arizona on targeting the same senators to actually block Trump care if it gets over to the Senate. And so we have these call teams in 3 of those states that are just driving hundreds or thousands of calls in all the time. And so when we give these call sheets to our activists, me and John Bowser Bauman who go around, we list all of the offices and oh, good. Here's some good calls. We list all of the offices, DC, and all the district offices, and you can call all of the offices just one after another. So, Heidi, let's take a call from Michael in Colorado. Michael, you're on the air.
Yes, hi, good morning. I was calling here briefly just the voice with Heidi saying, oh, by the way, I'm calling from a Credo phone. I don't know if she's connected with Credo Mobile or not.
She is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they do a lot of great work, and every time they send me a voicemail to vote on something and all that, I participate, and I think most Credo callers do the same. But I just wanted to say, number one, I called up Michael Bennett's office, and I voiced my great displeasure and anger. He's never going to get a vote from me. I don't know if he's term limited out or anything. You have to call. I will call all of these senators here that you've mentioned, even though I'm not in their states, because we have to let people know that this is affecting the whole nation for the next 30 or 40 years. And this guy is not. He is somebody that's hiding behind a curtain like the Republicans do, with a lot of big money that's been poured into this state and all to get. We're starting something here in our state Senate that's going to affect women's health, and I'm not going to get into it right now. But we have to fight against all of these people that are literally what they want to do is to take apart our government and all, and put a system which is going to be basically corporate and big money based, and we will not see our rights returned, certainly in this century. If we keep going this way, we have to fight. We have to really get angry. So I wanted to say that. I wanted to thank Credo Mobile and everything for what they do. Thank Dr. Tom and you and all for carrying the ball. And we really have to get vocal on this. And I'm waiting for April 15th because I'm going to be out there on that tax protest and all. There's our next step to really get loud and really put the fear of God into these people.
Michael, thank you so much for your call. Heidi, would you like to respond to Credo Mobile customer and great activist, Michael?
Yes. So thank you so much for being
in the last minute here.
A Credo Mobile member. And I think you're so right that the fight in Colorado with Senator Bennett, he needs to be held accountable. We have activists already working in Colorado who've been, out in front.
We might have lost Heidi. She's back.
Oh, sorry. I was saying that with some partners, we delivered Michael Bennett a spine on Tuesday. Apparently it didn't work. But, we'll be looking forward, Michael, to working with you and other folks in Colorado to keep holding him accountable through the election.
And Heidi, that was not a setup of, it didn't say Credo Mobile member. You just happen to have awesome activists all around the country.
Right.
Tell actually everybody who's listening where they can find out more about Credo and everything that you do.
Yeah, you can go to credoaction.com, which has all of the campaigns we're running right now, and you can join us.
Heidi Hess from Credo Action, taking us through this incredibly important fight on the next Supreme Court justice, the potential for a lifetime appointment for a corporate puppet. Heidi, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be taking more of your calls on the Thom Hartmann Program right after this.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading today from What Would Jefferson Do? A Return to Democracy. I'm on page 109. These are, the title of the chapter is Myths About Democracy in America. Myth. Left to themselves, people would drain the treasury. Reality. They haven't. To the contrary, conservative administrations have. Conservatives are aggressively promoting the idea that democracy is doomed and should be replaced by an aristocracy of large corporations who already largely control the Republican Party because, they say, people are fundamentally lazy and will drain the treasury, simply voting themselves unlimited welfare benefits. This is a slur that is particularly directed against people of color by conservatives in the United States. This myth is especially ironic since the irresponsible fiscal policies of conservative presidents Reagan, George H.W., and George W. Bush mostly created today's budget deficits. Numerous conservative websites promote this myth by quoting Alexander Fraser Tytler, 1747 to 1813, a Scottish politician and historian who allegedly wrote in 1776, quote, "A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, always followed by a dictatorship. The average age of the world's greatest civilizations has been 200 years." End of quote. Given that USA is over 200 years old, that's a rather scary quote. The problem is that Lord Tytler had his facts wrong. At the time he wrote the statement, if he did, Bartlesby simply lists it as unverified, only one democracy had existed for more than a few decades, Athens. And its end had nothing whatsoever to do with people voting themselves benefits from the public treasury. In 1776, when the quote was supposedly written, the world's second democracy was just being birthed and wouldn't take full form for another decade, so it seems on its face nonsensical. Similarly, Tytler's description of the way nations with representative governments would fail is accurate only if you're counting those democracies that are corrupted by the wealthy and powerful to the point that they've become sham democracies and, in fact, have become feudal aristocracies where the feudal lords are the wealthy individuals or the powerful corporations. History and the experience of the world's mature democracy shows us clearly that when a majority of people participate in democracy, even simply by voting for the representatives, they don't vote to steal the wealth of the nation from themselves. Another myth, liberal democratic policies are socialism. The reality, democracy has nothing to do with collective ownership. Conservative commentators love to roll out this myth when people in a democratic society agree to tax themselves in order to provide for the common good. No rational liberal or progressive in America is suggesting that we should Well, actually, let me back up a little bit. It says, in fact, the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines socialism as any of various economic and political theories advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods. A system of society or group living in which there is no private property. B, a system of condition of society which the stages of production are owned and controlled by the state. So then it goes back to the book. No rational liberal or progressive in America is suggesting any of these things. Have you heard a conservative complain about our socialist police forces or about our socialist fire departments? Of course not. But they're paid for by taxes. Or our socialist roads or our socialist air traffic control system. Or best of all, our socialist military with its strict rules that the highest paid may not make more than 20 times the salary of the lowest paid. Its comprehensive free healthcare system and its subsidized housing. Indeed, the military might qualify as the most socialist institution in our government, though I doubt they'd like to be called that by conservatives or anyone else. So why do conservatives incessantly apply this label to programs that don't match the definition? It's because the word has such a negative reputation. Socialist and communist nations have, for the most part, been conspicuous failures, killing tens of millions of dissenters in the process. This is as using the word socialist as in the old Union of Soviet Socialist Republics context. Modern democracy is not collective ownership, but a political system in which the voice of the people is not only heard in government, but is the government. The means of production and distribution of goods and services, except those having to do with the commons, like fire and police, should continue to be privately owned. But just as certainly, we the people must take back ownership of our government. This will remove us from Benito Mussolini's vision of a corporate state and leave us in the radical middle place of a constitutionally limited democratic republic, a modern liberal democracy. Myth. Free markets are nature's way of making the winner fit and strong. It's Darwin. Reality. Darwin's method led to more diversity, not less. Conservative activists love to complain about the dangers associated with the concentrated power of government. Indeed, anybody who's ever spent time in the third world, in dictatorships like the old Soviet Union, or in a repressive communist state like modern-day China, and I've worked in all three, understands how dangerous concentrated and unrestrained government power can be. The real problem, however, arises when there are gross inequalities in the size and difference and power of different entities in a culture. This is true whether the giant party is a powerful government, a powerful corporation, or a vastly powerful individual. In any case, ordinary people can find themselves in trouble without a thing they can do about it, no matter how great the injustice. And it goes on from there. The book is What Would Jefferson Do? A Return to Democracy. Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and I want to let you know, all the callers who are calling in, we're going to have a whole hour to take calls next hour. Right now, I want to talk about a really important topic, and then we're going to take calls on everything next hour. But right now, I have a great joy of being joined in studio by Dr. Maya Rockeymoore, who is the CEO and president of the Center for Global Policy Solutions, globalpolicysolutions.org, and just an amazing activist and, leader and just everything. We've been fighting on Social Security together for years.
That's right.
I remember when basically, all the way back when it was kind of lonely, right? It was there weren't that many of us who were fighting just against cuts.
Absolutely.
And callers, I know you think I can only talk about Social Security, but I can talk about everything: Social Security and Medicare. So we're going to pivot, but I have to spend a second on this because. Literally there were events. I'm thinking of the steps outside the Peterson Summit with Senator Sanders. I mean, it was you, Senator Sanders, maybe like one other person.
You too. You were out there. I mean, absolutely. And the people on the inside, Bill Clinton. Yeah, I know.
We were just saying, no, you shouldn't cut Social Security. But yesterday, you were on the Hill. At an event at a press conference that to introduce a bill to expand Social Security that had 151 original co-sponsors on it, which is like 81% of the Democratic caucus.
Absolutely. Congressman Lawson reintroduced for this Congress Social Security 2100, which is a bill that basically extends Social Security solvency while also expanding benefits to meet the needs of those who are most vulnerable. It does all kinds of great things. So I was proud to stand with him.
And, you know, I just wanted to bring it up mainly because you've been there the whole time, right? Like you've seen this movement of what happens when you fight with the people and you consistently raise your voice with the people, and then the people fight with you. And maybe DC's a lagging indicator, but in time, it comes around. And that is where I think we are seeing some pretty good progress.
Absolutely. So when I got to Washington, which was in 1997, one of my first jobs on the Hill was working on the House Ways and Means Committee, Social Security Subcommittee. At that time, you know, the whole notion of Social Security privatization was coming to kind of a head, but we had to build coalitions. And so from that space, you know, in 2005, George Bush announced he was going to privatize, and we were on the front lines working with you and others. But after that fight, which we won, we decided collectively that we were going to push for expansion and put them on the defensive because it didn't feel good to be on the defensive. Remember that? And so ever since, we have been on the offensive, and we've been, and along the way, we've seen senators and Congress people pick this up. We've seen people across the country start advocating, and it's been awesome to see the power of the people in terms of pushing this.
Couldn't agree more. And when we're talking about Social Security, what we're really talking about is economic security. We're talking about the ability of people to have real freedom because they're not, you know, afraid of not being able to make the next rent payment or mortgage payment or pay for their prescription drugs or anything like that. And I want you to tell our listeners about some of the other work that you do, the summit that you have coming up, the Future of Wealth. What is it? Because this is all like tied together.
It is. We actually define Social Security as wealth too. It's a public asset. Now, you know, we pay into it through our payroll taxes, and our employers, if we have an employer, matches it. If we are self-employed, we pay the full amount. However, it's a public asset that benefits our personal wealth. Because if we experience, quote unquote, the vicissitudes of life, you know, if we die and leave children or other dependents behind, if we become disabled, or if we retire, we actually have an asset that can protect our personal wealth from eroding. And that is the Social Security benefit. So we consider Social Security and, you know, retirement security generally, any retirement savings that you have, as a part of our savings, assets, and wealth.
So what is this summit that you have coming up? Tell us about it.
All right. So we do a lot around, as you well know, racial wealth inequality is a big deal, as is general wealth inequality. But most people don't know that for every dollar of wealth held by the typical white family, African Americans own 6 cents, Latinos own 7 cents, Native Americans aren't even on the chart. It's sad. And so what we have is, you know, an inequality that is historical in nature, that has been perpetuated through public policy and through private practices in terms of wealth stripping. And so what we're trying to do is raise attention to the fact that the reason why these people and people of color are disproportionately dependent upon Social Security when they retire over a lifetime of work is that, you know, they're economically marginalized otherwise. They have very little assets to rely on. And the reason for that is historical and policy driven. And so this year, we hold this summit every year. This year it's going to be in Washington, D.C., April 26th through the 28th. And we're focused on technology, inclusion, and social change. The reason why we're focused on technology in the context of wealth is because literally technology is the new great, you know, industrialization, if you will. This is the game now in terms of if you do not have technological competence, if you don't have some kind of leg up in technology or a foundation in technology, you're literally going to be left behind in the new economy. Not only that, we're finding that a lot of these technologies that are being deployed are actually, you know, discriminatory in nature.
Right. So let's kind of shine a light on that aspect. So an incredibly important point is that you have these historical, the assets that white families have inheritances often that they can rely on, right? So these are familial things. But then policy-wise, you have generations of policies that go specifically to extend and empower white supremacy or to continue this wealth gap and this divide. And it plays itself out. You have some things that over time are can push back against it. Social Security actually has a great effect at pushing back against some of these inequalities, which is, I don't want to spend all my time on Social Security. They always accuse me of doing that. But that is one of the myths out there, that Social Security actually widens this, but the opposite is true. It actually is one of the better, maybe best policy at narrowing this gap. But sometimes it's a private side thing, right? So it's a business decisions that are made that are going to continue this divide.
Absolutely.
And now we're seeing it in technology, where technology has a diversity problem.
Are you kidding me? Technology has a huge diversity problem. Now, if you look at Silicon Valley, it looks nothing like America. And when you look at specifically the people who are coding and putting these algorithms and everything else together, it's it's a male universe, there's not gender balance, and it's primarily a white and Asian male universe. And this is actually having implications already for the nation, because what we're finding is that these algorithms are biased. They actually have formulas that are biased against low-income populations, people of color. And they can influence everything from, whether or not you have access to credit, whether or not you get hired for a job. I mean, literally, we're now finding that these algorithms that are being come up with by these engineers and technologists are actually having real world implications for populations. And they're having a negative effect in some respects for lower income populations disproportionately of color.
I want to keep this conversation going, and because it's really important to also note that it doesn't have to be an active bias that's put into the technology. It could actually just be that we live in a society where these biases exist.
Absolutely.
And they find their way into technology that can amplify them. So we want to keep this conversation going with Dr. Maya Rockeymoore on the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Find out more about the Future of Wealth Summit at globalpolicysolutions.org. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. Continuing to join us in studio, Dr. Maya Rockeymoore. This is a really important conversation. I could spend a long time on it, but we have in this country, white supremacy can manifest itself in almost every aspect of this country. You brought one up that is really important, but people just kind of don't think of it, I don't think, or many people don't. So I, by virtue of being white, have an advantage on my credit score. That is a bias that just exists because demographics, right? They say, oh, well, this is science or actuarial, and they cut people up into different, and I just get a bump on my credit score just by virtue of being a white male. And that is not because of a sort of, it's not like the actuary has to be a white nationalist, right? No. They're looking at data tables and they're saying, oh, no, but the real world implications of that are massive, and they continue the wealth disparity, right?
Absolutely.
You can't get it's harder to get a car loan. It's harder to get a mortgage. All of the decisions that are made, it's harder to get a job.
Right.
All of those things all trace back to this credit score, right? And now what we're seeing with technology is a sort of what word am I looking for?
Automation.
Automation of those processes, right? So Tell us a little bit more about that.
So big data.
Right.
Well, actually, let me back up, because when you talk about credit scoring in itself is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's ontological, and it's racialized in nature. So, people build credit by the kinds of credit they have access to, right? So if you live in a low-income neighborhood and somebody down the street is going to sell you a rent-to-own couch that you get on an installment loan, you go ahead and do that, not realizing that that kind of installment loan is worth less in terms of credit compared to like a jumbo mortgage or a conventional mortgage, which is going to get you a better credit scoring in terms of how they do it on the back end. So literally the world that you live in, which is often racialized because we live in a highly segregated society, actually shapes the kind of credit you build. At the same time, as you well know, low-income populations who are disproportionately unemployed compared to whites, et cetera, and have challenges paying on time, especially when you're in the lower income status. All of that comes into play. And big data itself, the kind of data that we collect, is biased. And now we're actually seeing the bias in data actually being accelerated because we have machine learning, where they take the big data and the machines are learning from themselves, but reinforcing the biases that exist in the real world because they're actually relying on original bias data. Mm-hmm.
So we have 30 seconds here. The idea here is if you start, it's basically like comparable to junk in, junk out, where
that's right.
If you have the data going in that has these biases, and then you have a process that basically amplifies that, and it could be an astronomical number of times, right? With machine learning, that's the point of it. Run hundreds of thousands or millions of data sets. Well, if each one has a little bit of bias, what comes out the end can be a massive bias.
Absolutely.
So I want to keep talking about this and some of the work to fight back against it. Joined in studio by Dr. Maya Rockeymoore. You can learn more about all of this at globalpolicysolutions.org. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and continued in studio with Dr. Maya Rockeymoore. You can find out more about all of the stuff that we're talking about at globalpolicysolutions.org. There is so much amazingly important research here that, I really want people to learn about this, and I'm trying to do my best but there's no way we can really get at all of it. So I do think people need to go to your site, read your reports, and see that these are incredibly complex, but they're not disconnected from reality. These are real issues that we're facing right now.
Absolutely.
So let's go to this one. If you have, it's kind of like junk in, junk out. If you have some bias, like a credit score has bias in it, racial bias embedded in it, and then you put it into a machine learning system, these complex algorithms that do accomplish a lot, right? So the businesses see, oh, well, I'll make money by relying on this to make decisions. But if there's a bias that can get put in there, it can be amplified massively.
It gets exacerbated, amplified, and then what's garbage in, garbage out. What comes out actually has massively negative consequences for real people.
Tell us a little bit about some of these. Like, what are you looking at, and what is coming down? What's in the future?
So one thing I do want to highlight is our recently released report. It's called Stick Shift: Autonomous Vehicles, Driving Jobs, and the Future of Work. We've been looking at and curious about what increased automation is going to actually mean for American workers. And so we decided to, given that there's such a race now amongst the technology firms and the car companies to actually deploy this driverless car vehicle technology, we wanted to understand what was happening with this with regards to workers. And so our paper, our recently released paper, actually models a scenario where there is a relatively rapid transition to level 5 technology, which does not require human beings, which they're actually perfecting right now, these companies. And we found that approximately 4.1 million jobs are at risk. We found that,
correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like the easier part of automation is not going to be just everyone gets in their car like the Jetsons and it drives somewhere, but there could be truck routes, right, that always do the same thing, right? So it goes from point A to point B back, and those are automated.
And so I should tell you that what we looked at were trucking. We looked at delivery car or delivery trucks and heavy trucks. We looked at buses, and we looked at chauffeurs and taxis. Those were the only professional drivers that we looked at. And there are 4.1 million of those on our nation's roads. The vast majority of those workers, 93%, have less than a college education. And the money that they get, the income that they get from these driving jobs is relatively good. It keeps them out of poverty. Our analysis finds that if this happens, the vast majority of those workers, who are actually white men, will be disproportionately and heavily affected. And that states like Iowa, Mississippi, Arkansas, Indiana, North Dakota, West Virginia will be hard hit for two reasons. One, they have a disproportionate number of their labor market in driving jobs. And two, those drivers in those states earn a driving premium from those jobs, meaning that they earn more from driving than they would from non-driving jobs. There's also a people of color angle with African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans actually also probably going to experience a disproportionately negative effect because of the same reason, disproportionately represented in those jobs, and then also earning a driving premium from those jobs. So there is a massive change that's coming to our nation, and it's called automation. What we project is
Thank
just
you. That's
in
the word that I just automation.
It's
Thank
just
you.
But just think about it. When you go to the convenience store, when you go to CVS, when you see those self-checkouts, or you go to the grocery store and you see those self-checkouts, those used to be people. Just think about it. Now we're seeing, we've gotten used to not seeing an actual human teller at the bank. We just go and get our money out of a machine. But now we've got restaurants. You can walk into a restaurant in downtown DC or San Francisco or New York and never come into contact with a human being. You put your order in on an iPad and your food comes out of a wall and you never see or touch a human being.
I'll tell you one thing about the grocery store one. That's just annoying. Right? I mean, like, now they got you to believe that bagging your own groceries and everything and checking out and doing that labor yourself is a convenience. It's like, I don't know how they sold that one.
So Sam, I'm gonna bring this back around, and that is the fact that studies vary, but the higher end estimates project that within the next 20 years there could be 47% of American jobs could be put at risk due to automation. And this is not just low-wage, low-skill jobs. It's also white-collar jobs that are projected to be affected. And so this is not the time to be tearing down our social safety net. It's not the time to be taking apart our social insurance system brick by brick, which we know the Republicans have always wanted to do. This is now the time, because there are so many vulnerabilities due to automation, for us to be strengthening our social insurance safety net. So we can protect these workers and their families as we make a transition to a new economy and new jobs.
Because work is going to look different in the future. And it doesn't have to be negative if we go into it. I mean, that's the point of wise public policy, and which is what you do, right? You're looking at these issues before they become problems, it's starting. And you can say, okay, well, this is probably where we're going to go. So let's have some public policies that help make this transition actually work for people. So I'm a big believer, and you don't have to be scared of the future with robots. You should be happy, because maybe we're going to get to the point with wise public policy where, you don't actually have to work 40 hours a week or something. The issue will be if all the gains of automation go to the very few, right? If what they do is they get rid of all of the labor and the workers get cut out of all of the gains in productivity, and it all goes up to this global oligarchy, this handful of super rich people, and everyone else is left in a world where there are no jobs.
Which, with the current political structure that we have, is likely.
Right.
I mean, we have people in power who do not believe in support. Look, I call them policy sociopaths.
I call them arsonists.
Look at this American Health Care Act, this travesty
Trump
of
care.
what they called the Trump care, what they called health care reform, which would have, it was literally going to kill people.
Yeah.
And they didn't
Destroyed
have any
Medicaid,
qualms.
raids Medicare $117 billion, throws 24 million people off of their health insurance.
While giving a $600 billion tax enrichment to the already rich.
Yeah, I call it a handout. That's what they're looking for, because that's the way that the global oligarchy gets rich. They steal our money. It's a upward redistribution of wealth. In the last minute here, 45 seconds, Maya, can you tell everybody where they can go to find more? Because we might have laid out the problem, but there are solutions. The solution is people power, first of all. We have to beat the global oligarchy. We have to beat the arsonists. But first, arm yourself with the data. So where can people find out more?
Go to our website, globalpolicysolutions.org. If you're on Facebook, just type in Global Policy Solutions and like us. If you're on Twitter, we're at Policy Solutions. We'd love to engage you.
And coming up, if you're in D.C., your summit is coming up here in D.C. Tell us again about that.
It's actually sold out, but we're going to actually run a live cast because we've got great demand. 2017 Future of Wealth Summit. Go to our website. You can actually register, and we'll put you on a wait list, and we'll send you the live cast so that you can participate.
So the answer is globalpolicysolutions.org. Dr. Maya Rockeymoore, thank you so much for joining us on the Thom Hartmann Program.
A pleasure to be with the great Alex Lawson.
I don't know about that, but I am Alex Lawson, filling in for Thom Hartmann, and you're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be right back after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. With few exceptions, but this is page 176. With few exceptions, most Native American cultures did not have our notions as part of their collective mythos. Instead of the story that we're separate from creation and born to dominate it, these older cultures held a different view of the place of humans in the order of creation. They believe we are part of the world. We are made of the same flesh as other animals. We eat the same plants. We share the same air, water, soil, and food with every other life form on the planet. We are born into life by the same means as other mammals, and when we die, like them, we become part of the soil that will nourish future generations. They also believe it is our destiny to cooperate with the rest of creation. Every life form has its special purpose in the grand ecosystem, and all are to be respected, they believed. Each animal and plant has its own unique intelligence and spirit. We are permitted to compete with other plants and animals, but we may not wantonly destroy them. All life is absolutely as sacred as human life. Although hunting and killing for food are part of nature's order, when we do so, it must be done with respect and thankfulness. Older cultures are most often cooperators, not dominators. There are human cultures who do not engage in the destruction of the world. They demonstrate that destruction and domination are not an inevitable part of human nature. Prior to the emergence of younger cultures about 7,000 years ago, the anthropological record shows that not one culture believed itself to be separate from and superior to nature. We find the remnants of these older cultures in tribal people around the world, such as the San, the Kogi, the Ik of Uganda, the Navajo, the Hopi, the Cree, the Ojibwa, living in harmony with the world around them, the people around them, and seeing all life as sacred. The San Bushmen don't even qualify as Stone Age, since they've never used stone implements, only tools made from wood. And yet they were successfully pursuing their way of life 40,000 years before Aristotle, and they still are. They leave behind few traces, as they are such masters of resource management. That's sustainability. And contrary to the stories of our culture, it was and is often a happy and comfortable life. When we lived like that thousands of years ago, we enjoyed cradle-to-grave security. The tribe took care of itself. We cared for one another. If anybody had food, everybody had food. If anybody had a diseased child or an infirm parent, everybody had a diseased child or an infirm parent. The measure of wealth in such societies was security. Mediums of exchange like money were unnecessary. The idea of hoarding food or other things was unthinkable because everybody was responsible for everybody. Our ancient ancestors lived in the way of all other cooperator societies in nature, but be they the society of wolves or chimpanzees or prairie dogs, they looked out for one another. Our ancestors, people like you and me of all races and all continents, lived like this all over the world for 40 to 200,000 years, depending on whose archaeology you accept. And then there were eruptions among traditional cultures. In some parts of the world, people began to move away from their hunting and gathering lifestyle by experimenting with agriculture. This created more efficient food production, thus increasing their numbers and giving some people the ability to hoard food, the beginning of what we call wealth. Then a subgroup of the agriculturalists began experimenting with a new cultural idea of coercive or forced evangelism, of bringing others into their culture in a way that had never been done before. Their gods told me that if they couldn't evangelize others, then they should utterly destroy them. They were a very few, probably not more than a dozen tribes, which arose out of the tens of thousands of tribes that populated the planet. And this small number of tribes proceeded to wipe out and displace and destroy the thousands of other tribes who were living in a sustainable, peaceful, and connected to nature way. They left the garden and began to create dominating city-states and then empires. They were the first people infected with Wetiko, the origin of our younger culture. And because of this, they had become more efficient at increasing their own numbers. They had more sunlight under their own personal control. Of course, there was a price to pay for this. While the San, Kogi, Ik, and other native peoples may spend less than 2 to 4 hours a day gathering food and attending to the needs of life, and do to this day, by the way, in younger culture societies, this balance was radically shifted, as average people must work longer and harder just to survive. Those who were the dominating individuals in the culture, however, could live luxuriously and work less and less. So for every person who only worked an hour or two a day, another person would have to work 4 or 8 or 10 hours a day or more. Without massive exploitation of resources or theft from others, for every person with 10 times as much wealth, 10 people must have only 1/10 as much. Social and economic classes were born, and the first governments came into being to define, order, and control the socioeconomic structure, and help the wealthy maintain and increase their riches. Whether they knew it or not, these governments, mostly kingdoms in the early days, transmitted younger culture values to all citizens, rich and poor. The power brokers of this time programmed the consciousness of their subjects, just as our governments, educational institutions, and mass media do today. Nobody knows what brought about the first eruption of Wetiko cultural insanity, But logic suggests it was most likely happened in places where food resources were only cyclically abundant. For example, the Tlingit and Weda Native American tribes of the Pacific Northwest and the area around Vancouver Island were apparently extensive traders and owners of slaves. And this was because they could store food. This is where it all began, beginning wealth. Anyhow, the book is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. This is just a small dip into it.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we are going to be taking your calls all hour long. So give us a call, 202-808-9925. All we're doing this hour is taking calls, so let's get right to it with Brent in Massachusetts. Brent, you are on the line.
It's scholarly Lawson. Alex, it's so funny because I'm shipping champagne here. I just popped the cork in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm saying La ilaha illallah Muhammadan, and you got all these, of course, the brainwashed Jardons coming out. Yeah, thank you for being such a great employee for the deep state. Of course, thank you for getting all these progressives. It's so funny. The Russians did the same.
Thanks, Brent. I don't know what Brent is talking about, but, trolls are going to troll. So let's go to an actual call here with Denise in Chicago. Denise, you're on the line. Denise, can you hear us? All right. I'm going to go to Lisa in Washington.
Hi.
Hi.
So glad to be on the show. I love this show. So I wanted to make a comment and also ask people if they agree with me what I think I'm seeing. I had said about 5 years ago to people, I said, it looks like the way this country is going, the price is going up, food, rent, insurance being taken, all the benefits for the poor and the working people and the middle class are being taken. The homelessness is getting ridiculous. And I said, it seems like they're cutting everything off so millions of people can go somewhere and die. And I didn't even want to think it, but I said, what else could it be? Because if you don't have insurance, you don't have a home, you don't have a job, the food is so high. What choice do you have but to go somewhere and die? And I didn't want to think this country could go there. But now that the Republicans are in, and it's not just Trump now, don't get it wrong, it's not just Trump, but he is one of the filthy rich, I call it filthy rich, that are causing these policies to come about. Now, at one time, Paul Ryan, I think, was saying, this was like 2010, oh, these people on food stamps look healthy to me, maybe we need to cut them, which is a lie, and they try to make you think the people getting these benefits are all Mexicans or poor. They want to blame everything on the brown people. When you look at the statistics, it's way more just regular Americans, white people getting these benefits too. And they're the ones getting the welfare. Anytime Bank of America and all of these Wall Street, everybody get all this money and they're not even having to be responsible for it. That is corporate welfare. But they want you to think that this woman down the street getting $400 a month is, breaking the bank when they the one getting $400 billion. Okay, so keep your eye on what's going on. And if it's true that they want millions of people to go somewhere and die, and they're going to try to cut everything off, I feel sorry for the people that voted for Trump. And I think some of them are beginning to see, although some of them are so brainwashed because he taught them don't listen to the media. Well, they're in like a little bubble, but it's going to break, okay? Now, I've been keeping track of homelessness. There's a lot of middle-class people that used to make $200,000.
Lisa, thank you so much for your call. I think you're exactly right that we are seeing this general trend at the moment where there's an upward redistribution of wealth. from the pockets of working Americans into the pockets of rent-seeking, parasitic billionaires and Wall Street, pharmaceutical industry, big insurance. These are places that don't create things. They actually look at people and extract wealth from them. And I agree that, you know, it is definitely happening. The upward redistribution of wealth is happening and accelerating. I do think that we are maybe at the point where we're going to watch it start coming back because the people are fed up. And there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation out there. We just got to make sure that we are truth-telling and letting people know exactly why it's happening, where it's coming from, that it is these greedy liars on Wall Street, you know, of which, you know, Donald Trump put half of them in his cabinet. And, you know, the way to fight back here is to do what people are doing. Hammer their elected officials' offices with phone calls. Next week, show up at the town halls. Just raise your voice. And the most radical act you can make is to get organized. Find your neighbors and stand with your compatriots, raising your voice together. Dave, I want to go to Dave in Seattle. Dave, you are on the air.
Thanks so much, Alex. Hey, listen, maybe you can explain my fellow progressives to me. I noticed there are a lot of progressives who have started to kind of poo-poo the Trump-Russia story. And to me, I feel like everybody who's going to lose from this story, whether it's Devin Nunes, or it's the deep state, or Vladimir Putin, or Donald Trump, that's all good for us. And I guess I just don't understand it. Maybe you can explain their side.
Dave, I can't explain their side. I would say one more thing, which to me, and I think you probably agree, but it's just you kind of started at step two. The first thing is that what matters is the truth. We need to know what happened. We need to know the truth of the matter. And that's that this is not just a story. This is actually reality that we need to get to the bottom of it. We need to, it's multifaceted, and like Nunes just stepped down his chairing of the Intelligence Committee, and I don't think that's how you pronounce his name. We can check into that if it's Nunes or not, but he stepped down. He was just a patsy for Trump, who on some Saturday morning got in a tweet storm that was a total lie and fabrication. I mean, like, I every once in a while, I just am awestruck and bewildered at the fact that a lot of this stuff just traces back to Donald Trump, just like angry tweeting on Saturday morning when nobody is around to take his device away from him after, you know, he's binge watched some Fox News. But then, so there's that aspect of it. But then there is what happened and what role, what did Russia do? What, you know, how did that work? Were there psyops and espionage and all these other things? And that's just to get to the bottom of the truth of what happened. So that's why we have to go after that. I think part of the problem is when people and the media, the corporate media, needs to tell it this way, that everything has to be the horse race, right? Like everything has to be rough and tumble politics. So what does this mean? Who's the winners and losers politically? And when you put everything through that lens, it does create a distortion field where you have people, you know, who don't want to, they're like, oh, well, I don't want to talk about this, the truth and reality over here because it hurts my messaging on my message of XYZ. But, you know, as long as we stay really focused on uncovering the truth and getting to the bottom of what actually happened, that's what should be driving everything about the Russia story. And I think now what we've seen is there's only one way forward on it. It's a special prosecutor. It's an independent investigator that needs to be put in place because there are too many folks on the Hill who are complicit or corrupted or patsies because they're not that bright. I don't know if Nunes, which one category falls in, one of those three. But we need an independent investigator on this at this point. David in Nevada. David, you're on the line.
Hello, Alex. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. I first actually met you for the first time in New York City on January 14th at a single-payer conference.
Ah, yes.
And then I love your speech, how you always talk about, how they put their hands in our pockets to steal the money that we paid in. I love your style.
But that's true. The liars on Wall Street do reach into our pockets and steal our money.
I love your metaphor, and I'm really glad you were on Thom Hartmann Program all this week. And I really wanted to call you. So my wife, she spoke at the conference, and we were the ones that our daughter passed away because we didn't have health insurance. The doctor turned her away without proper medical care, and she died of a blood clot.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember my wife Amy speaking at a conference that you spoke at.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been with their organization healthcare-now.org. We are working with the local Nevada chapter here, and then my wife Amy and I we've been planning monthly healthcare rallies. We had one on February 25th, and when Bernie Sanders called for those national rallies, and so as you know, there's tomorrow. April 8th, all across the nation, there's going to be a national day of action for healthcare. So we're organizing another one here in Las Vegas, and we got Congresswoman Dina Titus to speak, and a bunch of local progressive leaders, and we're urging, our elected representatives to our U.S. Congresspeople to back John Conyers' H.R. 676, and he's getting a lot of co-sponsors every day.
He's three away from He's three away from the biggest number he's ever had of co-sponsors. David, I'm pretty sure I was looking down to get this information, but folks can find not only yours in Las Vegas, but the ones that are happening all over the country by going to campaignforguaranteedhealthcare.org. Or Progressive Democrats of America, and they can find all the information about. There's going to be rallies across the country, so you can find the one near you or create one if there isn't one. In the last 30 seconds, again here, David, go over the one that you're having in Las Vegas, and for everyone who's listening in Las Vegas, they can join you at the Expand Medicare to Cover Everybody, the single-payer rally in Las Vegas.
Yeah, so it's going to be on Saturday, April 8th at 11 a.m. in front of the federal courthouse at 333 Las Vegas Boulevard.
David, thank you so much for all that you do. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, and we'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Taking your calls all hour on the Thom Hartmann Program. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we are taking calls all hour. Going to go to Johnny in Texas. Johnny, you're on the air.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I didn't hear the If you allow me less than 60 seconds to give you my question and a comment, and then I'll hang up for your answer, okay?
Okay.
My question is, I'm confused about these rules changes by Republicans. My understanding is that the only time they can do major rule changes, like whether or not to filibuster, is in the first 3 days or first 2 weeks following an election. What is this changing of the goalpost during a game? That would seem to frustrate me if I were a player. And then my suggestion is to your guest from yesterday, Noah Westrich of the If Not Now Movement.org, the people who are standing up for the Palestinians not to be subjugated by Israelis. My suggestion for them is the next time they meet people like that, if they pose the question to them to help explain to them how it's possible that the Israeli government can promote themselves around the world to anyone who's Jewish to visit Israel for 10 days for free, which is actually being subsidized by the United States, in light of the fact that they in turn subjugate the Palestinians, not unlike the way they were subjugated during 1930s Germany. And that's all I got for you.
Thanks, Johnny. So your question about the rule change, they actually can. So what I always say is there's always these rules in the Senate. There's rules. We can't do this. If it helps people, oh, no, there's nothing we can do about it. You don't see it. It's in the rule book. We're not allowed to do that. It says it right here. It's an old rule. As soon as it helps billionaires and it goes towards power, they're like, rules? Who needs rules? We write the rules. And that's actually the truth. The Senate literally writes the rules. So they can write their own rules whenever they want. And that's what you're seeing right now. And they are literally write their own rules. So they could write a rule that says we can only change the rules in the first 3 days of the Senate session. But then in the middle of the Senate session, they could write a new rule that says we actually now have a rule that says we can do it whenever we want. I know that seems like weird, but that's actually how it is. The Senate writes their own rules. So that's what we're seeing here. And, you know, there's a lot of like tradition that they say, oh, well, this is the way the Senate has worked. Again, the august body, the most deliberative body in the world. These are all things that you hear in this town. You almost only hear them when it's like, well, let's guarantee health care is a right for all Americans. And they're like, whoa. According to this rule, we're not allowed to do it that way. But as soon as it's, hey, this nominee for the Supreme Court, nominated by Donald Trump, who's under a cloud, an FBI investigation, his legitimacy is very, very much in question. This guy, Neil Gorsuch, is an ideological extremist. All the reasons I laid out, well, they look at the rule book and they say, nah, we're going to change it because this is going to benefit the money power on Wall Street. This is going to benefit our corporate benefactors, the paymasters of the Republican Party. And that's what they're going to do. They just can rewrite the rules. And that is why, you know, the only thing they do respond to is people power. So the way you fight back is hammer their offices with phone calls right now. Right now is when it's so critical. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we'll be right back taking more of your calls after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we only got 2 minutes in this segment, so I'm going to go right to the phones. Anthony in Virginia. Anthony, you're on the air.
Hi. Very quickly, I honestly believe, just listening to the Republicans use the nuclear option, we as progressives have to break through the conservative media barrier. Because I don't think the people who listen to Fox News and other news channels will really understand until they actually feel the pain of the policies that they're going to put forth. We're in the middle of the greatest theft of wealth probably in human history. Probably not since the Dutch ran into Mansa Musa. Until the average quote unquote American feels the real pain, I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to say. Because,
Anthony, thanks for your call. I think what I'm seeing, and, maybe you have a different opinion, but I actually think that the American people are there. They're fed up with the fact that the system is so tilted towards the wealthy and the powerful, and that there's this massive upward redistribution of wealth from my pocket directly into the pockets of the richest people in the history of the world. And the people are there, but you pointed out, you started by saying the corporate media and the Fox News bubble and the distortion field around conservative media. And we do need to break through that, because that propaganda is confusing who is doing what to whom. And that's where there is this disconnect. So I think now, though, we as truth tellers have an obligation and an opportunity, because it's just true. Right now, the Republicans have unified control of government. They just they just ended the filibuster. They changed the Senate rules to ram their ideological extremist nominee onto the Supreme Court. This is the lengths that these Republicans will go to push their ideology, their bankrupt ideology. And as these failures compound and become manifold, and just everyone sees this is the party. The Republicans are the party that represent Wall Street and big insurance and big pharma. At the same time, as progressives, we do have to maintain vigilance, eternal vigilance, that the Democrats, because the Democrats are not by nature a twin of the progressive movement, an ideological twin of the progressive movement. We have to ensure that the Democrats are listening to the people and the grassroots. The grassroots are leading, and the Democrats are reflecting back to the grassroots our demands of them. We want to highlight the distinction so that people really understand what side, who is fighting for whom. The Republicans right now, it is clear as day. They are fighting for big money power. They're fighting for corporate interests over people. They're fighting for Wall Street. They're fighting for every interest that involves giant sacks of money. And the Democrats are right now holding firm, listening to the American people and fighting for the people who say, you know what, what we need is health care is a right guaranteed to all Americans, free public college, higher education. We need the government to work for the people, not for Wall Street. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson. We're taking more of your calls right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Give us a call, 202-808-9925. We're taking calls for the rest of the hour.
With the Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading from Healing ADD. Richard Bandler, the founder of Neurolinguistic Programming, NLP, wrote the foreword for this book. And it's basically a book on NLP as applied to people with ADHD, but it's actually a pretty good book on NLP, which is actually how I originally wrote it. So we're on chapter 8 on page 80, Reconstructing the Past. Different types of memories, regardless of how anchored in reality or fantasy they may be, are stored in our brains in different ways. These forms of storage involve the 5 sensory modalities: sight, smell, hearing, taste, and feeling, and the subtle gradations of each sense, such as color, brightness, or contrast for the visual modality, for example. These gradations are referred to as submodalities. This is true for both adults and children. One of the ways our brain organizes information is according to the way it's stored. Our senses pick up something in the outside world. Say we see an insect fly by. That's an objective thing that we've seen. However, before that image makes its way to our conscious brain, it's processed by other parts of the mind and tweaked and tuned. If it's a bug that frightens us, perhaps a wasp, then the mind sees it as a bigger object and in sharper contrast than it really is. Other objects in the picture, the background, buildings, grass, whatever, become more distant, dull, perhaps even less colorful. The mind may increase the volume of the sound associated with the wasp and also attach a feeling to the image, probably a variation on what we might interpret as fear or panic, a feeling felt perhaps in the pit of the stomach or the trembling of the hands. So here's a quick list of some of the submodalities that we commonly use to experience reality and store memory. In the visual field, color or black and white. So this is how do you remember things visually? Color or black and white, contrast, size, bordered or not, moving or still, brightness, graininess, distance from us, associated or disassociated. In other words, do we see the scene as we saw it, or do we see ourselves in it? Focus, detail, texture, perspective, dimensionality, is it flat or 3D, proportion. That's the visual field. In auditory, loudness, tonality, distance, pitch, melody, inflection, location, tempo, duration. Gustatory, salty, sweet, spicy, musty, bitter, familiar, delicate. Olfactory, strong, faint, intermittent, familiar, unique, musty, moist, damp, mildewy. Kinesthetic, the feeling. Hard, soft, cool, warm, sharp, electric, intensity, duration, speed, location. Now here's the amazing part. If you know what modalities and submodalities your mind uses to store a particular type of memory, happy, sad, hopeful, afraid, neutral, whatever kind of memory it is, then you can adjust the memories you have of the past to change their emotional feel. For example, think of something, a memory of something that you did in the recent past, such as brushing your teeth last night. Mentally list the qualities of the submodalities. Your list might look something like mine. I see a still picture in black and white without a lot of contrast or detail. Associated, I see the mirror in the sink, but not myself. No border, 3D, about 2 feet square, about 20 feet away from me. I can hear the sound of the water running and taste the mint of the toothpaste. If I concentrate on it, I can remember, or imagine remembering, the feeling of the toothpaste on my toothbrush on my gum and the smell of the toothpaste. The feelings I associate with the memory are pretty neutral. Boredom might be the best way to describe it. It's something I do every night. Now imagine a control panel just below the image, or wherever you'd like it to be, with levers and dials that you can use to change the various submodalities. Reach out and change a few of the submodalities and see how things change. When I move the picture from black and white to color, I suddenly feel curious and interested in the process of brushing my teeth. It seems fascinating. If I turn up the volume, I become uneasy. As I increase the mint taste, I feel more awake. Nobody knows why this works the way it does. One theory is that the brain stores information holographically rather than digitally, so that the brain sees its own storage capacity as a three-dimensional space. Because we experience the world through our senses, it makes sense that we could organize the mechanism for storing the information about our experience of the world along sensory lines as well. When something is put into a particular space, it acquires the sensory nature of that space, since sensory signals are how we experience the world. So when a memory is put into the boring category in our brain, it becomes, in my case, everybody's different, but it becomes, for me, black and white still pictures and all the other submodalities I described before. When the submodalities are adjusted and the pictures are turned into a color movie, it doesn't just change the memory. It actually causes us to interconnect with or slide to a different storage place, a physical different storage space in my holographic brain. There's also a concept known as a critical submodality. That's the submodality which has the ability to shift others, probably the primary hook into the place in the brain hologram where the memory is stored. As you're going through the various submodalities, changing each one a bit in one way or another, turning up or down the brightness, the volume, you'll notice that there's generally one particular one. It could be anything from volume to contrast to smell to brightness, anything. It causes the entire picture to change and creates a sudden shift in the feelings associated with that memory. That submodality shift is the critical submodality. And once you know what your critical submodalities are, you can do this process much quicker. One of the most common and most powerful critical submodalities is location. When you move a picture from where it is, for example, in front and to the right about 4 feet away to some other place, for example, in front and slightly over your eyes, only a foot away, it often changes dramatically its impact. So it goes from there to talk about how to take memories that bother you or that haunt you even and transform them into things that are simply just who cares memories. The book is Healing ADD, Simple Exercises That Will Change Your Daily Life.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. We're going to go straight to the phones, and we're going to Bridget in Ohio. Bridget, you're on the air.
Hello. I'm a first-time caller. I just happened to catch the show real quick.
Great.
In the car. My call was prompted by the woman who was talking about how we want to take welfare away from the woman down the street, and we want to take the health care away, and they should just go somewhere to die. And I completely disagree. And I think you've made my point for me in your complaints about, the workings of government being a political horse race, and them changing the rules. And my opinion is that the government is completely dysfunctional. And so I don't want to hand my health care over to them to, monitor. And I don't want to hand over like the needs of the poor over to them either, because they've demonstrated that they just cannot function. They waste money.
Well,
they waste
Bridget,
resources.
the way they don't function, though, is that they give your money to the rich. So, see, that's why they don't function that way. They give your money up to the very wealthy instead of doing what the Constitution says, which is providing for the general welfare of the people. So this is a government that has been bent to the will of the super wealthy instead of working for the people. Now, when it works for the people, what it does is it provides things that we can't do on our own, that the private market literally can never provide. Things like Social Security, which is wage insurance against the loss of wages due to retirement, with an inflation-protected annuity that you cannot outlive, plus $1 million in life and disability insurance. There is nothing like that you can buy on the private market. So this is literally something that we can only do together. Medicare, which provides health care instead of the health insurance industry, which provides a bureaucratic, a Kafka-esque nightmare of long corridors of unanswered phone calls where they keep putting you on hold, hoping that you'll give up and you'll just go with the fact that you've been paying in, but they're going to deny your claim. That's what the private industry does. See, when the private industry has all of the power, including their bought and sold politicians, that is where we see the absolute tyranny, the absolute lack of freedom, because every part of our lives are commodified, owned, bartered, sold by billionaires and the global oligarchy who have zero, no at all. They don't ever have to answer to the people. The point of what we've done in this country is that we have created a system where the powerful are answerable to the people. When they stop listening to us, we throw them out of office. We take their jobs away from them. That is what our democracy does. Now, Bridget, I hear where you're coming from, but I'm afraid that you have been inundated with a fire hose of misinformation and disinformation that the cuddly overlords of the corporate realm are going to make everything wonderful if only government got out of the way. If only government got out of the way, then the pipelines that would spill oil into all of the waterways, or the tainted meat products that, kill people, the salmonella. If only we didn't have any government making sure that the products that we eat and drink are safe, or the drugs that we take are actually what they are, then the miracle of the market would just work. It has never happened. It never will happen, because it is a myth. It is a myth. It is a marketing myth that has been sold to people. So yes, government has its own inefficiencies, obviously, because it's a creation of humankind, and humans have their own inefficiencies. But government, answerable to the people, at least has a recourse. The billionaires and Wall Street are answerable to no one. So they see you as a profit center to extract money from. The health insurers have a profit motive to take your premiums and deny you care. So what I want you to really think about, Bridget, is something that I think you can, I'm not positive. I don't know if you have, say, Comcast or another something like Comcast, where you're going to want to think about whether you want Comcast in charge of making decisions for you. If you have an emergency, need an emergency appendectomy, and, the Comcast are going to give you a window. Oh, yeah, well, you can come in sometime in this window. Right? Just think about Comcast every time you're wondering about, is it going to be a better system when we let a monopoly, a private company that have continually merged into larger and larger companies. Right now in the health insurance industry, there's 5, and they want to get down to 3, and then they're going to get down to 1. We will get to single payer. The only question is it a private corporation driven by greed and a profit motive to extract wealth? Or is it made by we the people as expressed through our government and answerable to the people? So yes, there are inefficiencies in government, but we can redress those. That was the radical beauty of the system that we set up in America, that we are the inheritors of this legacy, this radical idea that each and every one of us has a right to ask for redress of grievances by the people who we send to this town. We lend them our power. We lend them our power for a short spell. And if they don't do what we want, we get rid of them. We throw them out of office. That is a very, very radical idea that we're in the middle of. But it is corruptible by big power and by big money power, who can actually buy senators, buy representatives, put them in place, buy the corporate media to shoot a fire hose of propaganda, and make it seem like if you give them more power and more money, maybe Comcast won't be totally horrible hot garbage at all things customer service. Maybe if you give them just more power, they're somehow going to be more answerable to you. It's just not going to happen. Never has, never will. That's my rant. Sorry, I was supposed to be taking calls. I'm going to get back to it. Donald in Illinois, you're on the air.
Yes, how you doing? I'm really getting me angry is this stuff about Syria is going into war now over there to go protect these kids. I'm a veteran. I was drafted in 1966 and got out in 68. That was Republican 101 was running away from. The problem is with this thing, we're always creating military hotspots just so we can increase our military empire. That's what this is all about. It's funny how we don't go in any of these other countries that brutal dictators like Syria, Arabia or China or some of these other areas. We want to stick our nose again where it doesn't belong, and we're never going to get out of there. I think we ought to be focused more on the American people rather than strategic interest that this country has always been using as an excuse to get us in wars in.
Donald, thank you so much for your call. I think, when you have Donald Trump's budget wants to increase Pentagon spending massively, right? Tens of billions of dollars, $54 billion more into the Pentagon, into these massive weapons systems. Our military is already larger than the 10 next militaries combined. There's a problem there, and not to be too cliche about it, but here you go. When all you have is a hammer, every problem starts looking like a nail. And when you have a hammer that is, very shatterable or something, to just take this metaphor and burn it to toast, and it breaks every time you use it, but you make money, because that's really what the military industrial complex is about, right? You have to use these armaments, so then they have to buy more. And, the Beltway bandits around here who wield an enormous amount of influence, lobbying, campaign contributions, and all of it, they know that chaos and unrest and military intervention is actually a profit for them. And that's what we're up against. So thank you for your call, Donald. And we have to understand that we do have a moral obligation, and we need to actually stand up and be on the side of right. But that does not mean that we need to be in endless, ceaseless war. That means that we need to clearly use the diplomacy that is available to us to work with our allies, and most clearly to stand on the side of right. So, Donald, thank you for your call. We're going to take more of your calls, finishing out the hour. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we will be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Taking more of your calls to close out the hour on the Thom Hartmann Program. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and I will go right to the phones. Ali in Minnesota.
Hi, this is Ali. I wanted to remind the people, the American people, that we saw this bad movie before. You remember Colin Powell? He took one little jar into United Nations. He says, "Oh, Saddam holding this weapon, that weapon." Actually, it is not. The Bashar Assad forces, the government forces, they bombed the ISIS weapon depot. And ISIS holds all the chemical weapons in Middle East.
So I want to, I don't think we have all of the answers, the information here. Thank you for your call. I do think that we have to be very careful as a nation to think that the answer to every problem is another war, an invasion. And I think, the unrest that we're seeing in Syria and the creation of ISIS is directly from the war in Iraq. I mean, the actual war in Iraq and then the de-Baathification and getting rid of the army, all with zero forethought to what that would mean, led to hundreds of thousands of veterans of Saddam Hussein's police state, his intelligence network, were just thrown out they had the keys to the kingdom and they knew where everybody was buried, and then they lost their jobs, and somehow, the Bush administration thought this was going to work out swimmingly, and of course it didn't. So all of these forces came together in the creation of ISIS. ISIS's goal is to destabilize the region, to come back into Iraq, but it doesn't matter. They could take over wherever they are. It is an incredibly complex situation, and our intervention, the war in Iraq, going in with very little forethought and predicated on lies, did not help the situation. It created more problems and more problems. And that's why any reaction, any sort of action that's taken in that region, in the Middle East, needs to be done with a huge amount of forethought, of talking with our allies, of working with our allies, of working with folks who we don't consider our allies, but we could share a common interest here. But again, really standing firm on standing for what are our American values. And this is, the point that I think we just can't let there be another rush headlong into anything. There needs to be a long deliberation. We need to understand exactly what is happening, what happened. The gas attack that happened in Syria is barbaric, horrific, needs to be repudiated just condemned by every person of conscience. But we can't allow the answer to everything to be a war, because that is not going to lead us to a better place. And we got here by running into that solution in the past. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we will be right back after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we are joined by Skype by Victoria. We are joined on the phone by Victoria Jones of Talk Media News. Victoria, there is a lot of news out there, so help us wade through it.
Yeah, let's wade. And believe me, with the weather in Washington, D.C., waders is what you need. It's unbelievable today. But that didn't stop them in the Senate from going nuclear. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell invoked the nuclear option to gut the filibuster for Supreme Court nominees. It's historic. And that means that Neil Gorsuch, the judge from Denver on the appeals court there, will be confirmed and will become Justice Gorsuch by sometime tomorrow night. It also means that future high court nominees will be able to move forward in the Senate without having to clear a 60-vote threshold. And Senate Democrats blocked Gorsuch's nomination, 55 to 45, and then McConnell sought to change the Senate rules. And all 52 Republicans supported that.
So every single one of the Senate Republicans decided that they needed to change the Senate rules to install this handpicked justice who it is something that the American people need to remember, that every single one of the Republicans voted to get rid of the filibuster. The Republicans made this decision to get rid of the filibuster.
Yes, but they would come back to you and say, but the Democrats did it first in 2013.
And if the Democrats did it in 2013, then the Republicans definitely did it in 2017.
And it'll be very interesting to see who controls the Senate in 2018.
That and beyond as well.
Indeed, indeed. Now, at the moment, Mitch McConnell said, the Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said yesterday, or Tuesday it might have been, that no Republicans have an appetite to get rid of the filibuster on legislation. So that will stay. There will still be a 60-vote requirement for legislation, at least for now.
And what else is happening out there? I know there's a lot of news. I have these two TVs that I'm watching as well, and it's just a cavalcade of news.
Well, President Trump has told some members of Congress that he is considering military action in Syria in retaliation for this week's chemical attack, and that he recognizes the seriousness of the situation. Now, according to a source familiar with the calls, that's what they tell CNN. Now, the source says that Trump has not firmly decided to go ahead with it, but that he's discussing possible actions with Defense Secretary James Mattis and is relying on the judgment of Mattis. Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, is saying the first thing we ought to do is probably obey the Constitution. Short of Congress voting on it, I'm opposed to illegal and unconstitutional wars, he said.
And is the consultation is that Donald Trump is having is for unilateral action?
At the moment, we don't have more details than that. Nikki Haley, the UN ambassador, said at the Emergency Security Council meeting yesterday that when the UN repeatedly doesn't act, sometimes the U.S. has to go it alone. Nobody knew what she meant by that.
So we'll just have to wait and see. And, you know, Donald Trump is also getting testing his hand at diplomacy today, I believe.
That is correct. He is headed to Mar-a-Lago, flying down there where the weather presumably will be better. He's going to meet President Xi Jinping of China, and Xi's wife will be there also. She's a very famous songstress in that country. Melania Trump will also be there. There will be a dinner tonight, and then the serious diplomacy starts tomorrow. Trump told Fox News this morning, he was asked about trade and North Korea. He said, well, it's going to be very interesting. Nobody really knows in terms of what's going to happen. He said, we've not been treated fairly on trade for many, many years. No president's taken care of that the way they should have, and we have a big problem with North Korea. We're going to see what happens.
It's this is the sort of random diplomacy that we saw, and, like just take Syria. 5 days ago, there was a message put out that the standard was the U.S. wasn't going to take action against Assad, even though, we didn't like him. That was what was coming out of Donald's administration. There would be no repercussions. And then you see a chemical attack, and now it seems like there might be unilateral military action. And Trump seemingly is going into a negotiation/discussion with China and he's saying nobody has any idea, as if we don't have a long history with this nation. And, I would be remiss to also not point out that he's also doing this at his privately owned business, which benefits his family and himself in the pocketbook. So the one thing we know that's going to come out of this summit is that Trump Incorporated is going to be slightly more rich after.
Well, they won't be getting Chinese dollars because Xi is not staying at Mar-a-Lago. He is going to stay at a separate resort because the Chinese have decided they don't want to be under obligation to Trump. So they're going to stay separately. And it's interesting that he says nobody really knows what's coming out of it. So many positions in the Trump administration, particularly around things like this, around diplomacy, remain unfilled. Normally you go into these negotiations knowing what's going to happen because there would have been talks on the aid level and on the senior aid level, scripting all this out. So you go into this negotiation having a pretty good idea of what the deliverables might be.
Victoria Jones, Talk Media News, thank you so much for walking us through this very complicated news day. And I mean, this is literally, we just have to wait and see, I guess, what happens and what comes out of this. Victoria Jones, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Bob Ney's book, Sideswiped, Lessons Learned Courtesy of the Hitmen of Capitol Hill. Bob was the only member of Congress. He was a Republican congressman. In fact, he was the guy who invented the phrase freedom fries. That far right, yes. He was the only member of Congress who spoke Farsi, which is the language they speak in Iran. The Iranian government during the Bush administration, George W. Bush, sent a letter to, or delivered a letter to Bob in Farsi, because he spoke Farsi, saying that they were willing to recognize Israel and stop their nuclear program in exchange for recognition by the United States. Bob delivered that to the Bush White House, and within a short time, Bob found himself in a federal prison. And that letter never surfaced, and that rapprochement never happened. It's an amazing story. It's too long to read as an excerpt, but it's in the book. And, that was the end of Bob's political career. Now he's working for Talk Media News. But this is from chapter 17 of his book. It's titled Political Strong-Arming. I had a major blowout over the Head Start program with Andy Card, President George W. Bush's chief of staff. The first of the legislation debates centered on Head Start. John Boehner was doing his best to acquire votes to hurt the program. I had supported Head Start for years as an Ohio State senator and again as a U.S. congressman. When George Bush became president, however, every issue, including this one, was treated as though, if lost, it would be the end of the world, as if winning were vital to save the presidency. Speaker Hastert became a lapdog for President Bush. Didn't matter whether it was overspending, crushing unions, or ripping the legs out from under Head Start. Hastert acted like the president ran the House instead of the other way around. I found myself under intense pressure to vote against Head Start. I was bombarded by all sides: Tom DeLay, Hastert's staff, and the chairman of the Education Committee, which at the time was John Boehner. I found it amazing that a sitting president would make a do-or-die issue over taking money away from poor children who needed a jump on school, a Head Start. Anyone in the field of education knew that Head Start had a rocky beginning, but it had proven to be statistically and socially a very fine program, and I had always supported it. I had a private hideaway, an office the Speaker gives to leaders and long-term older members of Congress that very few people knew about. Even Brian Walsh, my press secretary, was unaware. On this particular evening, I was in that Capitol hideaway, one floor directly below the chamber. I was sick and tired of being lobbied and bullied on this vote. I had to escape the arm twisting. I used to say it was so bad that you could hear the bones snap on the floor of the House. My private phone in the hideaway was ringing, so I knew that only Ted Vander Meade of the Speaker's office could have given it out. Chris Kruger, my executive assistant, answered it and signaled me that it was Andy Card, the White House chief of staff. Andy said, "We need this Head Start vote. It's critical to the Bush administration's future." I was stunned at this. The entire future of the Bush administration was predicated on beating up on little unfortunate kids by taking away their Head Start funding. I thought this was idiocy and stupid politics. I said, "I have always supported Head Start over my entire career. I don't like this vote, and I just cannot help you." Card blew up at me and responded with, "Let me make this clear. Boehner said you were a vote for us, and we are holding you to that." "I don't know where Boehner got that from," I said. "I can rethink this, but I don't like it, and I'm sure I will not change my mind." Andy then said, "You are an effing liar," only he spells out the word. And I said, "F you, Andy, and your idiotic administration." And I hung up on him. I went to the floor of the House where Boehner confronted me. I told him, "Andy is disrespectful, way out in left field on this. He can kiss my ass and F him, period." Boehner continued to strong-arm me. They were one vote short. It boiled down to the fact that this vote was so hideous, so wrong, that they simply could not get the votes. One of my best friends in Congress, Steve LaTourette, took a bullet for me on this to move the bill along. He told him to back off on me and he would help through the process in the House, but not necessarily if or when the vote came back from the Senate. The second time Andy Card ran afoul of Congress, he had to confront Congressman Steve LaTourette. Steve was one of the finest members of Congress, very brave in his positions, an independent thinker, good at politics, and no wallflower. He's conservative on some issues, but he cares deep down about working people and how they survive in America. At this writing, Steve has left Congress, frustrated with the lack of acceptance of moderates within the Republican Party. Andy Card decided that he wanted to remove Davis-Bacon, a federal law that requires payment of prevailing wages to workers on public works projects, from the Transportation Appropriation Bill. Don Young was a strong transportation chairman and let LaTourette take the lead on the issue. I dug into Andy's history and found some interesting things. He'd been a Massachusetts state rep. He'd worked for President Bush's father, Bush 41. When Bush 41 lost to Clinton, Andy felt that the transportation bill had done the president no good, and he disliked labor unions, and he disliked unions in general. We all kept up a tough front. Transportation unions lobbyist for the building trades, like Tim James, was very effective and helped the labor Republicans push back. Bush 43, though, kept putting up roadblocks at every step. He simply did not want a transportation bill that might support the unions. John Mica, Transportation Subcommittee Chair, during a private Republican caucus meeting, made the best statement of the day. John said, hell, the president doesn't think we need a bill. As he travels in cities by car, they stop all the traffic for his motorcade. He thinks there are no traffic problems. The streets are deserted. We all howled. So anyhow, there's just all these amazing inside stories about how Congress actually works. It's pretty grim. The book Sideswiped by Bob Ney.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. And it is a rainy day here in Washington, D.C., which is maybe why my computer is not moving. But there we go. So now I'm going to take Adam in New Orleans. Adam, you're on the line.
Hi there, Alex. A quick comment and then a question. First comment is that while Obama was trying to ram through the TPP, he killed the USTR's report on unfair trade practices in 2014. It used to be a fantastic report produced for decades, and now we are scrambling to have that kind of broad picture. Now, my question is more around losing sight of the broader context of damage that's happening amidst the propaganda, gaslighting, and facts. In other words, it's almost becoming indistinguishable. As an example, voter suppression was reported all the way through February and now has completely disappeared as, you know, the shift focuses from item to item. We're losing sight of that bigger picture of what the strategic objectives of this administration seem to be amidst all the rest of the pieces that we're all very upset about. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that broader context.
Adam, that's a great point. And, you know, I think there really is, there was and it continues to be, I resist saying like, oh, well, they're master strategists. Like we've seen, they're not. They had 7 years to do something around Obamacare, and they just, you know, walked right into the door on that one. But they do have a strategy that has been to just create as so much chaos and so many stories that under the cover of chaos, they could advance their agenda. And that is happening. And you're seeing, you know, the corporate media is terrible at so many things, but B, their job is not actually to report the news. Their job is to sell widgets and to protect their owners and, you know, the stories they don't tell and the stories that they choose to tell and how they tell them, you know, is just to keep it going, very telling. And that is something that I really thank you for pointing out, that we always do have to remember the why, the and then. What is the purpose of this? And it is increasing control by money power, by the global oligarchy, by the small few people who have all the resources in the world, who are hoovering up even more and more money. And I'll kind of go to the beginning because it's such an important point. I hope that there's a lot written about the TPP and the disastrous trade policies, you know, written in large part by the pharmaceutical industry and in totality by the different industries' lobbyists. And, you know, these are the trade deals that this country has just so-called had to do for decades. And you point out the last president was a Democrat, and yet he was pushing trade policies that would have continued the upward redistribution of wealth, the decimation or the destruction of manufacturing and good-paying jobs in this country. And, you know, that really was an incredibly important part of how we got to Trump. To go with big picture stuff, austerity leads to authoritarianism every single time. Austerity, which we saw in 2010, a large pivot towards austerity. We saw, programs cut and cut and cut and cut. And this is under a Democratic administration. Now, yes, there was a Republican Congress, but why was the TPP being pushed all the way to the end of Obama's presidency, when it was clear by that point that Clinton's campaign, so his successor in the same party, did not have the numbers in the industrial Midwest, and that the TPP was a large factor in that. These failed trade policies, which actually you say failed trade policies, maybe Trump says that, they're not failed because they worked perfectly for what they were. They were elite to elite policies that enriched the global elite at the expense of working people around the globe. And we need to keep in focus the larger context and story all the time, that there has been, and it has been unfortunately for too long, a bipartisan upward or policies, at least acquiescence to policies. Sometimes the Democrats would be like, oh, we don't want to do it, but what can we do? But these policies, like these trade policies that would have extended patent monopoly rights given to these corporations over drugs that were developed by the public financing in America, and would have decimated and destroyed. I've been yelled at for using the word decimated to mean something different than 1 out of 10. So I'm going to switch to destroyed. Global national health programs around the world, right? That is literally taking people's health away, their lives. People would die without access so that pharmaceutical industries could make even more money, even though they are the most profitable industry in the world. That has been happening. That has been happening since Reagan, Thatcher, 30 years. And you can watch the upward redistribution of wealth, and it accelerated. It continued and accelerated under Obama, and it continues right now under Trump. So he's going to pretend he's going to, come into and talk about some trade policies, but all the people who he's put into positions of power are the exact people who started this trend, and the Republicans in Congress are the ones who push it. For too long, the Democratic response to the pedal to the metal upward redistribution of wealth that the Republicans proposed was to say, oh, well, we'll do it, but not as fast. And that is, I think, the larger picture. That is where there's a pivot, and now the people are saying, no more of that. We're not going to do that. We want to not just have half a loaf policies. We want to fight for what we want. Healthcare is a right for all people in this country. Free higher education, expanded Social Security. We want to tax Trump and his cabinet of billionaires and use that money to build bridges and roads and infrastructure and create millions of good-paying jobs. And we want to encourage trade. We want to trade. We want trade. But it has to be trade that benefits working people, working families, not these elite to elite lobbyist-written trade deals of so long. Adam, thank you for your call. You basically just let me rant for a while. And I'm going to be taking more of your calls as the hour continues. And, there's so much news and so many things happening that I think we do need to keep in mind what Adam said. Always remember the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is the wealthy and the powerful hoovering up even more wealth and power. And it's our voices that are going to fight back. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program, and we'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
More on the Thom Hartmann Program right after this.
keep in mind, Donald Trump is basing most of his campaign on the fact that wages have been stagnant for 35 years. And he's saying it's because of Mexico. It's because of China. It's because of our trade deals. Well, to some extent it is, but it's also, and in fact, according to these guys at the Economic Policy Institute, largely because of the loss of unions in the United States, which is, you know, the cornerstone of Reaganism. Destroy the unions, you destroy the funding mechanism for the Democratic Party, and they'll have to start getting in bed with banksters, which is exactly what happened. So anyhow, and so you would think that, you know, if Trump really wants to restore the American dream and bring back the American prosperity we had in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that he would be saying, hey, we need to go back to 35% unionization instead of the 6 or 7% we have right now in the private sector. Of course, he's not talking like that because he's a Republican. I mean, you just heard Harry Truman on this. So here are the key findings of the report. 1, for non-union private sector men, weekly wages would be an estimated 5% higher in 2013. This is the last year that they had numbers for that they could really crunch well. But it's, you know, you can extrapolate it to today. For non-union private sector men, weekly wages would be an estimated 5% higher in 2013 if private sector union density remained at its 1979 level. For a year-round work, in other words, union density, number of people who are union members in the workforce. For a year-round worker, this translates to an annual wage loss of $2,700. For the 40 million non-union private sector men, the loss is equivalent to $2.1 billion fewer dollars in weekly paychecks, which represents an annual wage loss of $109 billion, just slightly more than the net wealth of the Koch brothers. I added. For non-union private sector men without a bachelor's degree or more education, non-college graduates, weekly wages would be an estimated 8% higher in 2013 if union density remained at its 1979 levels. For a year-round worker, this translates into an annual wage loss of over $3,000. And they continue through the list. You know, it's taking out these various slices of people. The degree of non-union wage decline reflects how much unionization has declined since 1979 among private sector men by 2/3, from 34% to 10%. That 10% includes government employees. Among women by more than 1/3, from 16 to 6%. And especially among non-college degree men by more than 2/3, from 38 to 11%. As unions have receded from the private sector, their effect on the wages of non-members percent of unionization has declined. And this is they go through more of the details and all this stuff, but you know, this is something I have been pointing out since we started this program 13 years ago, that for every good union job in an economy, there's always a parallel non-union job that basically has the same wages and benefits because the unions set the floor. And as you destroy the unions, you destroy the floor. And now working people in the United States are basically falling through the floor. Wages have been flat since Reaganomics really took hold in 82, 83, 84. And they've actually declined, in particular for non-college educated men and for women since that time.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and I am going to go to my good friend, Joe Dinkin, on the phone. Joe from the Working Families Party, how are you?
Hey, Alex. Thank you so much for having me on today. And I hope you can hear me okay. I'm actually on the phone, and I'm also on the Amtrak.
Ah, that's a wonderful thing. I hope you're in the quiet car.
I am. I'm in the quiet car. I'm getting quite a few glares just for talking to you today, but it's worth it, Alex.
So I want to talk about lots of things, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that your fame has recently skyrocketed when you went on Tucker Carlson's show, and I would say you handed it to him pretty well there. So
I appreciate that, Alex. You're a lot nicer than my Twitter mentions that day. I had I would say a couple of dozen mean members of the alt-right calling me out. But I do think on the air, I was pretty surprised to hear Tucker Carlson tell me he'd be the first one to rally to the gates with me when Trump tried to transfer wealth upward. So I can't wait to see what his reaction is to Trump's tax and budget proposal coming out in the next couple of weeks.
I think we have to hold Tucker to that, and his bow tie better be on the front lines when the budget comes out. Joe, tell us about Working Families and what y'all are the Working Families Party and what y'all are working on right now.
Sure. So the Working Families Party is a national progressive political organization, and what we're focused on is electing the next generation of progressive leaders, recruiting, electing, and training candidates who can really speak to the values that we want to hear spoken about in America today, from attacking income inequality to, really dealing with some of the biggest problems our nation faces and is not really yet ready to address, from structural racism to climate change to the flood of money in our democracy. Those are problems that our nation can't afford to wait on.
Joe, unfortunately, your phone connection has given us a bunch of. I think it's the someone in the silent car on the Amtrak is giving us a hard time on the connection. I'm going to wait a little bit and see if we can get a better connection. It seems to come and go, but the Working Families Party has been at the forefront of fighting for working families around the country. Here in D.C., I follow everything that you do. I love watching what's going on here in D.C. as well. You have a lot of great campaigns coming up that you're in the middle of right now. And I think your resistance. So tell me about your plans for the recess, which is coming up next week.
Yeah. So over the recess week, can you hear me all right now?
Yep.
Over the recess week, our intention is...
Nope. Sorry, Joe. We might, Joe, I'm really sorry, but we might not be able to continue because the garbled phone line. I'm looking at Troy. Is there? Yeah, I think the Amtrak quiet car has won this battle. Maybe it's Tucker Carlson fighting back. Joe, thank you so much for trying here. And you can find out more about the Working Families. You can follow them on Twitter at Working Families. You can go to their website, workingfamilies.org. I think I bet you most of Tom's listeners know about Working Families Party, but if you don't, I really invite you to go and find out about Working Families at workingfamilies.org. You can find out more about the Working Families Party. This is a very strategic use of taking on the two-party system in a very strategic way, fighting for working families, fighting against corporate power. I was totally honest. You should Google it, Joe Dinkin, Tucker Carlson. It was a great segment, and you really get a sense of how fierce the fight is that Working Families is bringing to all around the country. Here in D.C., I think it's the chapter here is a couple years old. So find out more at workingfamilies.org. They have a. We want to talk about what people can do during the recess. That's why Joe and I wanted to have him on and talk about Working Families Party. And people right now really want to know what they can do to fight back. And just this is one of the resources that I want you to have. You know, there's Resistance Recess, which MoveOn.org and Daily Kos and some others, and go to workingfamilies.org. And these are places, as I've said multiple times, the most radical act you can take is to get organized. And I want to highlight some of the organizations who are doing the hard and great work of fighting for working families. And that is who I want people to be able to plug into. Now, they just changed the Senate rules to ram through a corporate Supreme Court justice who's there specifically so that they have 40 years. You know, I can't predict the future, but they put in place a young justice so that the corporations would have their guy on the court. They spent $17 million to do this. But the people are aware, the people know that 52 senators, Republican senators, including Susan Collins in Maine, who's supposed to be a moderate, who's supposed to not do, well, she fell in line and she voted to do this. Lisa Murkowski in Alaska. Dean Heller's facing the people next year. The people's voices will be heard. Remember, the most radical act you can take is to get organized. Your voice alone is powerful. Our voices together are unstoppable. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we'll be right back after this break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Taking more of your calls after this quick break.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Prophet's Way, A Guide to Living in the Now, which is largely my autobiography, essentially, a spiritual autobiography. This is from page 68, the chapter Changing the World by Changing Ourselves. The summer I lived in a teepee, I thought a great deal about the monastic experience. I'd read Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross and several books by Thomas Merton. And throughout my life, had been drawn to the idea of solitude as a way of speeding up spiritual experience and growth. And that had certainly been my experience in my semi-monastic summer. I received knowledge and insights that I doubt I could have gotten any other way. Before I went into the forest and lived in that teepee, I'd always considered the monastic experience to be both intensely personal and intensely selfish. A monk, I thought, was a person working on himself and only affecting him or herself. But that summer, I realized that my spiritual practice was having an effect on the world. I could feel it. It was as if the world itself had a particular vibration made up of the buzz of all the life upon and within it. And when I was peaceful, it made the world a bit more peaceful. When I was agitated, the world became more agitated. My conclusion from this admittedly subjective experience was that I really was affecting the world, that monks are spiritual warriors and that monasteries are places from which powerful beams of positive spiritual energy fan out from the men and women in them to transform and help the world. While not so common among the writings of contemporary monks, this view was clearly held by those people who chose the monastic life in the centuries and millennia preceding the last 100 years or so. And so I worked at making myself more pure so I could add purity to the world. But throughout this, there was also part of me that thought that this was a subjective experience, perhaps with no objective reality. It seemed on that level that it wasn't possible that I could be so closely connected to the world, that I could have any significant impact on it just by my state of being at any particular moment or throughout my life. Because it was me experiencing the world, then of course the world would change as I changed. My point of view is shifting or being contaminated by my own mental state at the moment. This assumption was the result of my training in science. Science is something unique to those cultures who were influenced by the Greeks or the Persians. In India, Chinese, and Native American cultures, there is no equivalent. They have philosophy and spirituality, which integrate what we call science with what we call mysticism. But in their classic traditions, they don't have what we would refer to as pure science. Two of the primary tenets of science are the things that things are ultimately divisible into tiny, definable building blocks, and then for there to be a true reality, the observer must be separate from the observed. In our dreams, we're both observer and observed. It's unreal. In daily life, we're the observer, and the things around us, separate from us, are the observed. So we think of them as real. In this worldview, the entire universe can be separated into pieces, the first and primary division being that of observer and observed, subjective and objective. Science believed, and Aristotle and Descartes and others taught, that if the subjective observer could rid himself of his personal and instrumentational subjectivity and identify all the relevant factors, then a truly objective truth about the world and reality could be seen, measured, and determined. This belief, accepted as an absolute truth and the underpinning of our modern culture, led to viewing humankind as separate from the natural world. The classic question, if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody there to hear it as a sound made, assumes that nobody there to hear it means a human. Only humans, so the story went, were capable of classifying and separating things, breaking them into pieces, as Aristotle taught us, and understanding their separate meanings. Only humans would recognize sound as sound. But as science divided matter into smaller and smaller pieces, a disturbing trend began to emerge. It was found that supposedly inanimate matter seemed to be affected by the act of observing. The first response to this was Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which stated that things were constantly in a state of flux. And so if anything were observed at any moment, by the time the observation itself was made, things had already changed. Therefore, it was impossible to ever truly and absolutely observe anything. Because by the time we'd registered the observation, by the time the photons of light had hit the retina of our eye, the thing we were observing had already changed. It was also noted that the act of observing was not purely passive. With an electron microscope, for example, electrons are bounced off of or passed through things to produce an image for viewing. Similarly, a conventional microscope only works when photons of light bounce off the specimen and into your eye. Light and electrons are bits of matter or energy that could have a demonstrable effect on the things being observed, further increasing the certainty of the accuracy of the observation. Heisenberg went so far as to say that the exact location of anything in time and space could never be known, regardless of method or instrumentation. So it seemed we really couldn't know anything as an absolute and real state. All we can do is engineering, working with things because they work, like electricity, even though we don't know how or why they work, which is in fact the case with electricity. This allows us to manipulate the world around us, to build machines and make things work, but it also leads to the dangerous assumption that to be able to use something is to know it. This is mirrored in human nature, too. We're constantly affected by our experience of life, and our experiences change our personality, our worldview, and our behaviors. And I'm not now the person I was before I met Herr Mueller, nor am I now the same person I was even a week ago or even 1 minute ago. We grow, change, and are constantly in a state of flux, and this provides us with an opportunity to develop the spiritual sides of ourselves, and by doing this, to make the entire planet more spiritual. So this aspect of the scientific approach turned out to be wrong. It was in fact not possible to separate the observer from the observed. The book is The Prophet's Way.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Thom Hartmann on the Thom Hartmann Program. And I want to just go right to the phones. Carl in Tennessee, you're on the line.
Well, Alex, you know what I tell you, I've been listening for a while on the show on the phone, and you have more patience with trolls than I've ever seen, son. You deserve your own show just for that alone. When you hear people, I just run across your show. Okay.
Yeah, that should be the hint.
That's a dead giveaway, trolls. I was just seriously, when the last time you really just been sitting in your car or at home just going up and down the dial looking for something to listen to? Give me a break. But I digress. Listen, I have two things. One about the filibuster and the nuclear option that Mitch McConnell did, and one about the interview you had earlier today about inequality. The first thing is this. This confirms my really disdain for Harry Reid and my disgust for him as a leader, because he should have done this as soon as he found out about the meeting that senators had, Republican senators, and a separate meeting between the Republicans' House of Representatives on the inauguration night of Barack Obama, when they said that they were going to deny him any victory, even if it was something that they usually agree on, and they were going to filibuster everything. He should have put in place the nuclear option, and we didn't get nearly as much as we should have out of a Democrat in the office and then the House and in the Senate, because he should have known that the first chance they got to do it, that they was going to do it.
Carl, I hear what you're saying, and I hear where you're coming from. I have to disagree about Harry Reid, though. I think that he did an amazing job. I don't know if you really could have predicted. I mean, now we know for certain. But at the time, I don't think you could have easily predicted that Mitch McConnell would literally break the Senate, would allow nothing to happen. So for his corporate paymasters, that was unprecedented. You know, like stealing Merrick Garland's seat shows the lengths of contempt that the Republicans have for the rules, if the rules are there to help the people and not the. So I hear where you're coming from, but I do. Here's maybe we can have a middle ground, a compromise, Carl, that says we definitely know how it is now, right? So we know how it is now. So going forward, we're definitely never going to think that, oh, no, maybe if we offer them a little bit, they're going to be more, they're going to come towards us, take a step. Or maybe this time Lucy's not going to pull the football away and Charlie Brown's going to get that kick, right? I mean, like, no more guessing, because we know exactly what they're going to do. Carl, you wanted to make another point?
Absolutely. And this, we have right here, and I'm glad you're calling for people to be activists, because I'm calling for people to do the same thing. And I need for everybody within the sound of my voice to, after you hear what I'm talking about, you need to call Congressman John Lewis or any other official in Atlanta. And this is what I mean here. I've noticed this love and caring feeling for people who is addicted to meth. And is addicted to heroin and prescription pills. And I can't help but wonder to myself as a black person in America, where the hell was all this empathy and sympathy for people who were in inner cities in the 80s and 90s addicted to crack? And if you notice the overpass tragedy that almost took place where homeless people were smoking crack and somehow or another set a fire and the tragedy could have really happened when the overpasses collapsed. And this is a perfect opportunity for people to say, these people, what more do they have to give? I mean, we're going to lock them up, or we're going to throw away the keys. They're already homeless, and they're already addicted to drugs. And this is a perfect opportunity for us to shine a light and say, hey, guys, I know you're caring about rural America right now and what's going on with the epidemic of meth and heroin. We still have problems within the inner city of people who are homeless and on crack cocaine, and not bury these people under the law, because this is what's going to happen. I mean, they're going to just figuratively and literally bury and hide the individuals who's responsible for this. And I think the opportunity for especially Democrats in this country to say, hey, listen, this is what I mean by two Americas.
Carl, thank you so much for your call. I think the key is that, because you're completely right, that the war on drugs response to crack flooding into the inner cities, and I think it flooded in. It came from outside and flooded in, and the response was massive incarceration, criminalization, and this is the exact wrong way to go. But I don't want to pit two. I don't want to pit what we need is a unified understanding that the war on drugs not only has failed, but the war. So drugs are bad. The war on drugs is worse. The war on drugs has destroyed more lives than drugs themselves, especially when you bring in what nonviolent drug offenders around marijuana use. This is just put in place so that the police could have a pretty good chance of randomly harassing people on the street and finding, there's some weed. Well, now I've got a reason to civil asset forfeiture is just taking people's money. And it's all this whole system where the police are not serving the people, but the people are actually seen as profit centers for the police. And the war on drugs is really the way that is done. That is what it gives them the power. So what we need is across the board in both rural and urban, dealing with both folks dealing with addictions, whether it's heroin, meth, crack, cocaine, anything. It's a public health issue. It needs to be dealt with in a public health manner. There is no criminal justice way to deal with addiction. Addiction is a public health issue. And we see there's winning strategies and policies. So if there will be an understanding, and it only comes through, it doesn't shock me that, say, a politician like Chris Christie, who I'm sure beats the drum, I know he does, beats the drum for the war on drugs as a drug warrior when it comes to marijuana, and he has a history of this, but he saw firsthand the devastation that addiction can wrought. And he actually gave a very powerful speech, and it was around opioid epidemic. And it doesn't shock me that people have to see firsthand, especially a lot on the right and the Republicans. They seem to lack a lot of empathy until it really is their family. But right now there is a moment, and the opioid epidemic has reached into every corner of this country and never let off the hook. Remember this company, Purdue Pharmaceuticals, owned by the Sackler family. Check it out. Their marketing campaign to overprescribe OxyContin. They pumped millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in it. It tracks perfectly with the opioid epidemic. This was a man-made for-profit epidemic, and the biggest dope pushers on the block are definitely in the boardroom, and the Sackler family worth $15 billion. But that's one of the ones that I get really heated about. It's just, this is but what I want to focus on is, if there is going to be a better way forward, and it is because of the opioid epidemic and people see it reaching in all over the country, that's good. It just has to be universal, right? We have to have the same compassion and public health, but compassion and empathy are important. This is also science. We have to have the same public health response to addiction, whether it happens in rural Illinois or downtown Atlanta, where you were talking about. That's the only way that we can address addiction. Otherwise, we're just creating a whole other problem with the war on drugs. I'm going to take one more call and then go out on a break and then come back and finish out the show, taking more of your calls. I'm going to try to get to all of you. So thanks for hanging with us. Adrian in California, you're on the line.
Hi, good morning, Alex. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. First of all, one of the points that I heard on your show that is I just am really upset about is the American people are sadly misinformed. Here in California, child support is collected from the absentee parent, and then if the mother is on welfare, she gets a $50 disbursement until it's all paid back from welfare. My ex got a $40,000 assistance program to help pay for his back due child support. Our back due child support was only $37,000. Where's the other $3,000? I was never notified, and they always notify of disbursements by mail. I never received anything, and I found out by accident because one of the clerks let it slip at child support, and then child support and welfare paid they collected the money. Oh no, they collected the money. Meanwhile, it's all gone. Now, when the welfare program was originally set up, it was set up to run off of taxpayer dollars, correct?
Yeah, the thing that I want to point out is that you are talking about a few different systems here. So, we're going out in break, so we only have a couple. We have 30 seconds here. Your personal situation, I can't really weigh in on, and there are multiple systems that you're talking about when it comes to child support and welfare and welfare systems, and the interplay is very complicated. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Finishing out the show with your calls right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and I want to go right to the phones. Tony in Wisconsin, and I'm pulling up a quote here. Tony, you're on the line.
Thank you. Oh, great show. I love it.
Thank you.
I got a paper here. It says if drug addiction or alcoholism is a contributing factor material to the determination of a disability, that the executive law judge can find that you are not disabled under sections, and it lists about 6 of them there, or 3 of them there, 4, and the one is 223, then parentheses D.
You don't need to read out the statute.
Pardon me?
I said you don't need to read out the statute number.
Right. I'm wondering how that works. What is that about? It's something brand new I've never heard of before.
You know what, Tony? I don't know the answer to that exact question. I would have to look into it, but there is discretion given to the administrative law judges to use in their determination of disability. And it sounds like what you're looking at is one of the pieces of discretion that has been given to the administrative law judges in making their determinations. And, that is, it's a very complex system, and there is a lot of, not an enormous amount. Well, actually there is. There's a lot of leeway given to the administrative law judges, but they are under an enormous amount of pressure all the time. And generally, the pressure comes in the form of corporate media propaganda that is demonizing people as the bad ones, right? Like, oh, well, don't give them the insurance benefits that they've paid for because they're the bad ones for whatever reasons. Oh, well, they use drugs. Okay, well, then they're not the deserving ones. And the disability side of social insurance is more complicated because there are determinations made by a judge. But the fact is, this is still wage insurance. It's disability insurance. And so if a person is insured and they fall into the categories that are covered by the insurance, then they should be able to receive the insurance that they've paid into. That's how insurance works. You pay your premiums in, and then you're covered. And then if you need the insurance, you get it. But right now, what the numbers are 4 in 10 people who apply for Social Security disability get it. I mean, those are the numbers. And it's slightly complicated there, but also at the end of the day, it's not that complicated. That's the answer. And this system that we have, which is wonderful, and the Social Security system is wonderful, and when people get their insurance that they've paid into, it's a lifesaver. I started my career working in a clinic, and I had clients who I would help as a health educator, figure out the paperwork for applying for disability. It's so stringent. I actually thought that the rule was you always got denied the first time. The only problem with our program is there's such political pressure to deny certain people their insurance because they're quote unquote bad or whatever it is, that there's far too many people who need the disability insurance who don't get it. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Thom Hartmann, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. And I have this quote from the Nixon era. I'm going to read, but I want to get right to the phones, and it should play right in with Betty in Pennsylvania. Betty, you're on the air.
Alec. Hello, Alec. I want to thank you for all the attention you're bringing to this terrible problem, and to tell you that we just lost my granddaughter.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Young woman, March the 16th of this year. And I want to ask you, don't you think at the bottom of all this, it's economic and it's money? Years ago, my girlfriends and I'm 87, we were going to write a book called Welfare is Big Business. But now I think we could change that title to Drug Addiction is Big Business, because it keeps so many things rolling and moving and in our culture. And I also believe, I did work for the unemployment office for many years, as you were involved in Social Security. I do believe that it's a cover-up for the lack of employment that we have. They will give you Social Security, which I believe they should get, don't misunderstand me, but they do that despite the fact that most people would think they do not deserve it. They give you that. They're doing all sorts of things to hide the fact that we do still have serious unemployment in this country. And I would love to hear what you have to say about those things, especially inequality and the economic causes of this.
Betty, thank you so much for your call, and I'm so sorry about your loss. And, I think there is, so the reason I say austerity leads to authoritarianism, or austerity leads to fascism as this kind of rule, because austerity leads to misery. That's the mid step. And misery, when people don't feel that they have, a way forward or a way out, then they look for somebody who is peddling, false hope, or the strong man, or, what Donald said at the convention, I alone, right? That is, we see that time and time again in history. There's another piece that follows misery, which is addiction, which is, into the austerity of the 80s, into the massive cuts, which were dressed up at the time as, the welfare queen. The welfare queen is taking all of the money, and this is Reagan and Thatcherism. And they're, but really what that is corporate media propaganda by moneyed interests who want to destroy these programs because it allows them to suck more money out, and literally big money profits from misery, destruction, and chaos. It's important to remember. That's why they hate systems that work. When systems don't work, that's where there's a lot of money to extract. So they destroy a lot of systems. A lot of systems in the 80s start getting hit by the hammer of the state, and they're destroyed. And in this, in kind of the chaos and carnage of that, then all these drugs come flooding in to the inner cities. It was basically an urban destruction at the time. And this is, again, you have this austerity, then you have misery, you have addiction, you have, this is a strategy. Maybe you don't want to say like it's some great, like forethought, or there's someone sitting there being like, aha, I'm going to do this. It's literally just greed, right? People see an opportunity to make money. One person sees an opportunity to make money by destroying this system into the misery that creates. Another person says, oh, I can do this marketing. And, I'm going to zoom forward to the austerity that has created misery around this country, and into that misery. You should look this up. Purdue Pharmaceuticals, the Sackler family, they poured Oxycontin, which they, in my reading, lied about to say, oh, well, this is actually not as addictive. They said, oh, no, it's time release. But if you look at the data now, it's not true. It's not true that it actually has this longer half-life, which is actually makes something less addictive if it has a longer half-life. It has the same half-life as heroin, or extremely similar. And so what we're talking about is flooding in a product that is barely different from heroin, And the Sackler family, Purdue Pharmaceuticals, spends hundreds of millions of dollars marketing this to be used from a stubbed toe. They didn't actually do a stubbed toe, but backaches, everything in between. They were saying, don't be afraid of prescribing this because you should be more concerned about pain than you are about the potential for addiction. And they have a whole marketing campaign, and you can watch it. The money that they spend, the overprescription of opioids all around the country, on top of misery caused by austerity. These are economic undertones of what's going on. And, you know, one thing that leads to is now on the Super Bowl, if you're watching the Super Bowl, you have to watch like 5 opioid constipation commercials. Like, the problem is, okay, well, now you can have this new pharmaceutical to deal with the constipation caused by the opioids. And what I'm saying is it's not one, it's greed that underlies it. It's greed that underlies it, but it is predictable. And we can fight back, and we can fight back with empathy, compassion, but most importantly with science. When it comes to addiction, we have to understand that it is a public health problem, and you have to have public health solutions. Harm reduction works. We have the data from around the world. Betty, thank you so much for your call, for sharing your story. And again, sorry for your loss. So sorry. And, you know, there's millions of people around this country who are seeing the devastation wrought by the opioid epidemic. And we need to make sure that our elected officials understand that the way forward is a public health response to this, not a criminal justice response. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Thom Hartmann. I'm going to be back tomorrow, and then you'll be very happy to get Tom back next week. But you got one more day of me on the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, signing off.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.